Management Partners. The reason why I named the company that is because it's about as nondescript as you can get. I started investing in properties while I had a full-time job, so I wanted to make sure that there were no issues. In this program, you spend a lot of time learning about the structure of investments, deal flow, how capital works, and you analyze big projects and big leases. So you have the knowledge and skills and abilities to get out there and work for any company that you want. What I'm going to talk about today is an alternative route. So you're going out there and working for any company you want, but at the same time, if you're interested in picking up investment properties in your own on the side until it becomes a full-time job, this will walk you through kind of the A through Z of how to do it step by step. And this is how I did it. If you have questions as I'm going through, please just throw up your hand and interrupt me, and we'll answer it, and then we'll keep going, or you can wait till the end, whatever works for you. I like this quote. I think real estate in general is about an awful lot of time on the front end, and then you reap the rewards on the back end. So a little bit about my background. In the past 10 years, I've worked for 2 large publicly traded REITs, real estate investment trusts, that own billions of dollars worth of properties across the country. For both companies, I handled their Miami portfolio, some stuff in Broward, but mostly Dade County, several million square feet of retail shopping centers. So, I mean, Publix anchored shopping centers, Home Depot anchored shopping centers, you know, the big stuff. In the past, I've handled commercial build-outs, negotiated more than 400,000 square feet of new and renewal leases, just like your quiz is going to be on today. And 50 million worth of build-outs, and then we've operated sites on behalf of First Washington Realty, which is a major player. You may have heard of CalPERS, California Teachers Pension Fund, have a lot of money in real estate, and then Jones Lang LaSalle also. A little bit about my background. I came through the program here about 10 years ago, was when I finished. My other background, also 10 years ago, about 2 weeks after that guy back there was born, I bought my first investment property. So I handle everything for the company, and most of the portfolio is high quality, low income housing along the Sistrunk Boulevard corridor, which is in northwest downtown Fort Lauderdale. So we'll see some pictures later, and it's gotten better over time, but I mean, some of the highest quality low income housing you could ever hope to encounter. And that's what differentiates my stuff from everybody else's. The Sistrunk corridor, if you're not familiar with it, is very much like Wynwood in Miami, where you have a lot of new development on the east in Flagler Village, new high-rises, upscale, condos, retail, all of it, and then it's gradually shifting west. I picked up 57 units over the past several years, and I do everything: site selection, acquisitions, the leasing, the management, accounting, all of it. So downtown, so these are all the big sites, right? Styles, Related Group, you know, etc. And then this is my stuff, just a little bit west. So today we're going to walk through getting started, some of the initial steps. We're going to talk about developing your concept of what you're uniquely equipped for and what you'd like to do. We're going to talk through developing your network, and it starts with the classmates that are beside you now, and then building a track record. We're going to walk through deal examples. The first one is about creating value, which if there's nothing else that you pull away from this lecture, it's about real estate. It's all about creating value. It's not like you know, on TV where you're flipping houses or speculating or making quick deals. It's about creating the value, getting better at that incrementally over time. And then we're going to talk about a bulk purchase that was done. The bulk purchase is a good example of how you can use multiple capital sources to get that acquisition done if you're not, you know, going into this loaded with millions of dollars. And then we're going to talk about some real funding sources. So when you're starting out, it's very difficult to get banks to pay attention to you. They have a specific deal type that they look for, a specific deal size, and you're not always going to fit within that. So we're going to talk about some alternative funding sources that are real world stuff that you can use to put together your first batch of capital to get some deals done. Everybody good so far? So I picked this quote because I think that when you guys graduate from this program, you're going into this with so much more experience and so much more knowledge than anybody else. So you're already leaps and bounds ahead of it. But you also have the advantage of being newer to it, in the sense that if you haven't bought properties yourself yet, then you're able to look at things with a fresh eye and spot opportunities that other people haven't spotted yet. So just quickly I'm going to work through some of the initial steps, and this is just setup stuff. This is the boring stuff, but just helpful to know. So if you're going to pick up an investment property and you're going to do it with partners, the first thing you want to do is to incorporate early. That's setting up your LLC. Some of this may be very basic for you. You may already have companies set up. You may know this, but I'll go through quick. So you set up your company at Sunbiz. The state of Florida makes it so fast and so easy. You go to Sunbiz, you look at what names are taken, what names aren't. You can register your company in about 10 minutes. It costs about $150. It's the easiest thing you could do. After you set up your company, you're going to need bank accounts. If you do partnership agreements, if you file taxes, for all those things you'll need a tax ID number, and that's like a social security number for your business. You can get that for free at the IRS website. Again, it takes less than 10 minutes. It's quick and easy. You have your LLC set up, you have your tax ID set up, and you're ready to roll. The other parts of this, right, building a website, a lot of you are probably already well advanced at that, but just having a landing page that you can go to when you're meeting with city officials, when you're meeting with deal partners, just a landing page where they can see, this is what you do, this is what you're about. And then it's about learning about the different markets that you're going to be in. What's attractive to you? Is it certain parts of Miami, certain parts of Broward, downtown, etc. And then after you find the markets, just looking at specific deals within these markets. I know that you guys are going to experience through this class of analyzing deals, but this is a good way to start analyzing deals that you buy for yourself. So within a given market, start pulling up deals and creating your projections. Right? These are my income, this is going to be my expenses, this is my return. And if you're doing it right, 98% of the deals that you do this for will not work. If you're doing it and every deal that you run the model on looks like a home run to you, then you're probably doing something very wrong. But the key is to start small and take baby steps. I think a lot of people, a lot of students that I've talked with before kind of wait and say, well, I need to time the market, or I want to do this at the right time. Is it the right time? Or they look at it from a personal perspective. Is this the right time in my life to do it? I got to get through this hurdle first, or I got to find this next job, or I got to graduate the program. And I would say don't wait on any of that stuff. I think you start now, you start taking the baby steps. I bought my first property 2 weeks after my son was born. I've been in my new job for less than 3 months. It was the worst possible time. For any of you with kids, it's the worst possible time to pick up something. But years later, I was really glad that I did. Second thing, developing your concept. So when you look at what's out there in the market, what you've experienced with, what I would try to zero in on is what you're uniquely focused and what you're uniquely capable of doing. For me, when I started out down here, I managed a very large shopping center in Liberty City. And if anybody's familiar with Liberty City, it's in northwest Miami. It's a pretty rough neighborhood. The shopping center that I was at, we had 10 armed guards working the property day and night around the clock. I've got crazy stories I could tell, and it was absolutely nuts. But I loved it, absolutely loved it. We made a lot of good money. We did a lot of good things to the neighborhood. And that gave me my initial experience. So when I wanted to start investing on my own, I knew where I wanted to be, but I knew I couldn't start by buying shopping centers. So I started with low-income housing and some rougher neighborhoods in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And that takes us number 2, is finding an easy access point. Once you figure out where you want to be and what you want to be doing in that market, you want to make sure you can get in for the lowest possible amount of cash. It makes it possible to do future deals, and on your first deal, you're going to learn so much and mess up so many times that you don't want to take a huge risk with other people's money on that first one. If you can take a small calculated risk with your own cash, that's the best way to go about it. The first deal is by far the hardest one. Once you get to number 2, it gets easier. Number 3, far easier, and then you're just rolling. So if you can start small, find a good access point through foreclosures, maybe overlooked properties, properties that have geographical, structural defects, anything that is making other people overlook them that you're uniquely suited to create value with, that's where I start. And then I think the last thing is to be able to find something that can be replicated. The key to making money in real estate is becoming really good at it. You don't have to become really good at the whole thing. You just have to become really good at what it is that you're doing in real estate. If it's shopping centers, if it's warehouses, whatever it is, if you can get a lot of experience doing the same thing over and over again, then it'll become very easy and very quick to make money at it. For me, I like bread and butter deals. To this day, I've done a number of large deals, but and you'll hit the large deals, you'll hit the home runs. but I like the singles and doubles, where you know you're going to make your cash flow for that month, and you know it's going to produce returns for the next 10 years without having to worry about fluctuation of the market or anything else. Just bread and butter deals that you can keep working on and keep building to the next one and the next one. Third thing, and some of you are probably already very good at developing a network, but I think this is something that while you're in this program you have unique access to, because it gives you so much knowledge and so many skills, but it also gives you the people around you who are focused on the same track as you are. It pairs you with a mentor. I mean, the mentor for me was just an incredible part of the process, something that paid dividends many years after I graduated from the program. And this provides you with a network of potential deal partners, the people that you are working in your groups with, you know, to model deals that you're going to present in class are the same people and the same skill sets that you'll need for the deals that you're doing in the real world. They may not be, you know, an 18-story high-rise in downtown Fort Lauderdale, but it's the same group and same skill set you can use to put towards your 3-unit apartment building. I mean, personal note, these are all the people that are in my sphere that I've met through the NOVA program and still do business with today. When I need my first deal financed through a real bank, I got that through the NOVA program. So my close colleagues who I'll call, you know, at Styles if I'm scouting a deal and I need some market data or I need advice on something, right through this program. My mentor, my hard money, the broker I work with, all came through the program. So I think when you graduate from this, you'll see that there's a number of folks that stay really involved with the program, and then there's a number of folks who don't. And the ones who stay very involved have a large network of folks that have already been through the program, and the professors and all those folks that they stay with, and it helps as you're building your career and building your first portfolio. Any questions?
Quick question.
Yeah.
I don't have a mentor.
Okay. That sounds like a statement.
After this semester.
Yeah.
Oh.
Is everybody else in the same boat, or you guys have your mentors yet?
They're allocated after they've been in the program and have successfully completed a couple of courses.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what we did too. I got paired up with a mentor at the very end of the program. Yeah, it was the same month he was getting married and I was graduating the program, and we continued on having breakfast once a month for 10 years after that.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Next thing is building a track record. So you'll see how this comes into play once we work through a couple deal examples in the next section. But a lot of times, you know, students will come up to me and they'll say, well, you know, I'm in the program and I've only been doing a little bit of real estate work in my day job and I don't have a track record yet. But I think what I want to get across with this slide is that the track record can be a lot of different things, but you want to be thinking in the mindset of building my track record. So whether it's expanded responsibilities in your day-to-day job, you know, I was working for a company that owned, you know, small shopping centers, and it was like every time they'd buy a new shopping center, I'd be the first one in my boss's office saying, I want that, I want to manage that one too. And the boss is over there saying, oh man, we need more people to manage this, or how are we going to do this? And I'm, you know, knocking on the door saying, give it to me. And for every single one they bought, right? So that's something that you can do with what you're doing now. It can be, you know, projects you're working on in class, right? That are getting harder and harder as you go through the program. That's your track record. Once you start meeting with your mentor may not speak up about a need that they need you to solve, but they have needs and challenges like anybody else. So if you can spot something in what they're saying, they may be talking about something totally tangential to what you're doing, but if you can spot in their need that they have and solve a problem for them, then you've improved your track record and made yourself a more valuable mentee. I would focus on being 3 things, and I think for any project you're taking on, whether it's, you know, work in real estate, whether it's in the classroom, just be thinking track record, track record, track record. It's got to be easily explainable, understandable. I buy houses and apartments in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Something that can be demonstrated as tangible, right? Pictures of what you've done, reports of the projects that you guys have done in class, data on square footage, dollar size of what you're handling for projects for your day job. You know, all the stuff that was in my bio at the start of this thing, right? Hard numbers on what you've done and what you can do. It's something that can be built upon, right? Shows the progress. So when you get out there and you're looking to buy your first property, you have that track record established. All right, we're going to walk through some case studies that are going to demonstrate just, you know, different aspects of investing with each one. This first one is all about creating value. As I mentioned earlier, that's the name of the entire game. If you can create value where other people don't see it or where other people can, then you're quickly going to create a lot of personal value for yourself by creating value at the assets. This was a property in Hollywood, Florida. It was a duplex. And they're saying, well, $61,000, you can't get a property for $61,000 these days. But the price of the property is only one leg of the stool, right? It's you know, can you get financing on the property, and what are your rents going to be like, and what you're paying for the property. So at this time, the properties were cheaper. The banks wouldn't touch them. I mean, there was no lending on any of this stuff, and the rents were depressed. The rents were, you know, 30, 40, 50% lower than they are today. So yeah, you can get the properties cheaper, but you can't do the other pieces. If you guys want later, I picked up a property just 2 days before Christmas. That was a duplex in Fort Lauderdale, and the property was $150,000. But you were able to get, I was able to get financing on it, and my rents were substantially higher. At the end of the day, the same property I picked up 3 weeks ago returns pretty comparable to this property I picked up 10 years ago, even though this one was half the price. And I can go into more, you know, specifics of that deal later on if you want, if you have questions on it. But the price is only one component, is what I'm getting at. The challenges with this property have been at market for a very long time. Over $600,000 in city liens. So what the city does is if a property's boarded up, they'll charge you for boarding it up. If it has unpaid real estate tax, they'll charge you for that. They'll charge you for cutting the grass. But then the other thing the city does is that for every day that goes unpaid, they'll charge you an extra $510 every day. So that's how you end up at $683,000. It was boarded up, vagrants living there, but there was potential, right? Everybody else passes by, but there's potential to create value. And to me, it was obvious as anything. Geographically, a great rental neighborhood. There's a church next door to the property, newly built church, so you had a lot of people coming through to see your property. A lot of other rentals on the street. It was perfect. Solid structure, concrete block. The roof was in good condition. It had it, and the units were large enough. So large units get more rent, and this was one that had the larger units, which was attractive. This was the before. So this is something else, right? These days, yeah, you'll pay more for a property, but you won't see the copper plumbing ripped out of the walls. You won't see the ACs destroyed. You won't see, you know, the toilet smashed up. So this was a pretty nasty one, and there were people living in here just squatting. So the first thing you do is to create the financial value, create the physical value, create the value of the asset. So I went to the city, and this is where the track record comes in. So just to back up, so when you go into contract on a property, if you're going to close the property in 30 days, you'll typically have an inspection period. That's some fraction of that. So you'll do a 7-day, 14-day inspection period on a property, and that's the time frame during which you can back out of the property and not have any liability. You don't lose your cash you put down, you don't lose anything. You can back out free and clear. So during this due diligence period is when you want to, you know, explore liens with the cities, get your roofers out there, look at the roof, really dig as much as you can into the plumbing, you know, all the physical aspects of the property. And any negotiations like this you do during the inspection period. So that way, if you're unsuccessful with the city and the city just wants their $683,000, then you can walk away. It's not your problem. So what I did is I went to the city, and I had established a little bit of a track record up to this point. So I brought my book of business with me. I said, look, this is another duplex I've done. This is where it started at. I had photos of all of it. This is what I was able to do and make it look beautiful. Here's a picture of the beautiful, happy family that's living there now, sending the kids to schools. And it's created a lot of value for the neighborhood. And I've done it here. And I did a bigger one here. I did a little bigger one here. And in 60 days, I can have this property beautiful, people living in here, and you won't have a blight on the neighborhood, and it'll look awesome. But I need you to do me a favor. I barely have enough money to purchase this property, and I barely have enough for the renovations. I want to make it beautiful inside so people can take pride in where they're living. I can have pride in it, and everybody can be happy with it. But I can't do that and also pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in liens. And going into this, the city doesn't expect to ever get that money. They know the property is only worth so much. If they took the property back, demolished it themselves, and sold the land, they'd only get a small fraction of it. So they're not expecting the $680,000. So with that, with explaining the track record, explaining what we could do, we were able to settle for about $3,000. Closed on the property, evicted the vagrants, fumigated the place, and then invested about $18,000 to renovate the 2 sides. So by creating that physical value, you create the financial value. So this is where we ended up at the end of the day. So you're talking $83,000 all in. Now, at this time, these days it's a lot looser. We can do a lot more with the banks and financial institutions, but at this time, after you held the property for 365 days, the bank could come out and reappraise the property based on what it was worth at that time, including what you put into it, the new rent you got there, so it gives it a whole new value. So they came out, they appraised the property after 1 year, and they were willing to do a mortgage for $70,000. So that's $70,000 back to me because I did all the rest with cash. Right? So that's $70,000 is not profit, that's $70,000 is money that I can put into the next deal. And then you repeat the process, you take the money out of that into the next deal, and then 45 deals later, you're still doing the same exact process. When I started investing in properties, I started with about $30,000, and with all the properties that I've acquired up till today, I've still never put any of my own money into the business, and I've never taken any money from the business. It's the same money, just recycled over and over and over again. That's the secret. It's not new cash coming in. It's the same exact money, same money. That's why I had the day job as I was doing this. Right, the day job was paying my bills, and this was just growing. So the property is now valued. Now it's, just over the past year, prices have come up quite a bit still. So it's now valued closer to $230,000, $240,000. The cash flow is much better now also, but at this time, it was a 74% return on investment. So if you're looking at stuff in today's market, right, the cap rate is the return you expect to get on. So these days, properties are sold at a cap rate maybe in the mid-single digits. So they're saying if you buy this property, you can expect a 7% return on investment. If you get a loan from a bank, you can leverage that up and maybe get a 10, 11, 12% return on your investment, right? That's standard. If you're doing a development deal, right, you styles with somebody, maybe you get a return on your investment closer to the low 20s, right, high teens, because you're putting in all that work for a development deal. So just give you some perspective on what a 74% return is. And it's not big dollars, it's bread and butter stuff, but in percentage terms, it starts to duplicate really quickly. So it's a finished product. Case study 2 is utilizing seller financing. Did anybody have any questions about the first one?
I do.
Yeah.
So you said renovated 2 sides. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, say it again?
You said you renovated 2 sides.
It's a duplex, so both units.
Up top and bottom?
Yeah.
And then, so what was your initial investment, since you didn't throw any money in?
My initial investment was all of it.
So you just threw that one chunk of money, and then you just kept rolling?
So I put it in one check because at that time you had to purchase all cash. This was the 5th or 6th deal I'd done, right? So I started off with $30,000, was able to build it up a little bit. But at this time I bought it, that $60,000 was all the cash I had, and I pulled it from different sources. And we'll talk about in the next section some alternative funding sources where I got that capital from. And then the renovations was all credit cards and such. Yeah, it was scrappy. There's no two ways about it. Yeah, bootstrap was I didn't even have boots. Yeah, so that's how it's done. Yeah, but after a year, you're going to get that money back out, right?
But you never took it out. You kept rolling it back in.
Correct. But you're going to be able to get it back from the bank, right? The money that you're putting out of pocket and you're putting on the credit cards. And I'm not a financial advisor, but this is how I did it. After a year, if you know you don't need that rent every month to live off of because you've got your day job, so you're getting in that rent every month and you're saving that up for the next investment, then you get the bank to finance after a year, you get that money back. That goes to the next investment, and it starts to snowball like that.
Did you ever put it into like a money market or a stock investment, or you just kept it cash liquid in a checking account?
Yeah, I kept it cash. Yeah, you always got to be, for me, I always felt like I had to be ready for the next investment. Right, this is what I know and I'm knowledgeable about and I'm good at, I know I can make returns on, so I'm not going to stick it in the stock market. I'll put it somewhere else where I don't have control over it. That's not to say at this point, right, you're doing a diversified investments and so forth, but when you're starting building your portfolio, I was putting every 50 cents right back into the next deal, the next renovation, or the next purchase. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you consider or compare selling versus renting?
Yeah, so as a whole, right, everything that I've acquired, for the most part I still have. There's been 2 properties I sold, but everything I hold on to for the long term. The problem with selling it is that you have to pay taxes on it. And if you sell it within 2 years of when you bought it, you have to pay much higher taxes on it. So you're paying off a lot of your profits, and then you know that money's gonna go right back into buying the next property anyways. So why, give your money to the government if you don't have to? When you refinance it, that cash comes out, it's not taxed. So you can take that money out, put it to the next one, money out, put it to the next one, instead of losing 30% on every deal, and then trying to put what's left back into it. So there's some people who try to sell, and selling is dependent on the market, right? What's the best price I can get? If I'd sold this back then, it'd be worth $100,000. Now it's worth $240 or something. Right? So keep the value for yourself and keep it going. And you get the rents coming in every month to go towards the next deal. I mean, I don't sell. I don't know why anybody sells. There's been situations where, if I did a lot with a property, right, and I had 2 other deals pending, and I really needed that cash, and I couldn't get enough out through financing, then I'd sell the deal. But it was usually more because the deal wasn't working long term for me for some reason or other. Maybe it was too far geographically, maybe it was too labor intensive. But just from a financial standpoint, it's just buying, buying, buying.
I was just curious on, I know it might get a little too complicated, but as far as the taxes, I guess when you were getting the loan back from the bank out of that property, I mean, technically you're not having to pay taxes on that money, no?
Correct. Correct. That's just a refinance. It's a loan. There's no taxes on
Gotcha.
it.
So you just buy the property, pull out the loan from that property, but you could just keep reinvesting that without having to pay tax. You're just paying taxes on the income from the rental properties. So.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. And even that's, once you get further with it and it gets more into the weeds, but even that's largely sheltered because you have depreciation from the properties, you get to deduct all your expenses, all the renovation expenses are deductible. So like where I spent 18 grand on the renovations, so the first 18 grand in rent you're pulling in, you're not paying any taxes on. The interest that you're paying on your bank loans is tax deductible. The real estate tax, insurance, all tax deductible. So yeah, it's just the way the code's written, but it's really advantageous.
If you're forcing the value, when you go, after you're done rehabbing it, you could potentially refinance in like 3 to 4 months, correct?
These days it's a lot looser. So it depends, I guess, depends on who you're going with, right? There's some larger banks that still want you to have seasoned it for maybe 6 months, 9 months, a year, to get the best and the lowest rates of capital, right? The 4 and 5% interest rates that are out there today. You can get cash out from hard money guys and different folks sooner, but it's going to be at a higher cost.
The reason I ask is because, like, for us, I assume, at least for me, if I was to buy like 3 or 4 houses, the goal is to be like financially free to a certain extent and like somewhat be able to live off the cash flow.
Yeah.
So, but you're saying that you're not touching the cash flow at all, even though you're forcing the appreciation and rolling that.
Correct, never. Yeah, because think about it, right? If you're getting a 74% return on investment on your money, and you're taking that $1,000 out to pay your rent or your groceries, that's 0 return. But for every dollar you put back in, you get that huge return, and then you get those dollars out. You put those, it grows so much faster than taking out any penny of it. Yeah, if at all possible.
How important are cap rates to you then?
Cap rates for small deals like this don't matter much. And if you're looking on the MLS or you're searching for deals, a lot of it is just garbage anyways, right? They'll sign it. And most of the realtors who put the cap rates on and say, hey, this is a 7 cap rate deal, don't understand cap rates in the first place, so it's not. And sometimes they just did the math, most favorably for their client, and sometimes they just don't understand. They get their masters in real estate. So a lot of times the cap rates are wrong. The cap rates, what I use for a starting point is I try to, and this is really getting the weeds, but this is good stuff. If I'm buying a property for $100,000, I want to make sure that I get $1,000 a month in rent. Right?
So you use a 1% factor.
Yeah, if I'm looking at something, right, just as a first pass, right, if I'm looking at 100 properties that day, I'm only going to pause the ones where I can do that. And then the second step of that is that if you, for every $100,000 you invest, after you've paid your insurance, your real estate taxes, your expenses, everything, after you subtract all your costs from your rent each month, for every 100 grand, you want to see that you're netting at least 500 bucks. And I think if you can do that, right, those are your two tests when you're looking at properties, to be able to weed through a lot of properties quickly. If you can pass those two tests, then you have a property where you say, all right, let me really drill down into this now and see what my real returns are. But those two tests will weed out 90% of it.
And that's even for your long-term holds where you're.
That's for everything. Everything, absolutely. And the rents don't have to be, you know, for a scenario like that, the rents don't have to be your in-place rents, right? Maybe a unit is vacant, maybe a unit's well on the market, those are your market rents. So once you've acquired the property, what you'll be able to get in rent for a unit, all right, subtracting out your expenses. Yeah.
How much are you keeping of the cash flow monthly for maintenance of the property, like to fix a window or whatever?
I mean, I try not to hold on to it, so only as much as I need to.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on the asset. Usually when I go in and buy a place, if I've fully renovated it,
You're not gonna have repairs.
you're not going to have stuff for the first year. I mean, you'll have stuff pop up, but you really, if you're renovating these places, you really shouldn't have too many issues. Yeah.
Do you do anything special with the property taxes? No, I asked that.
I pay 'em. Yeah, there's not much you can do. You know, if you have some larger, like I have an 8-unit building where you can challenge the property taxes,
Yeah.
you know, and when I worked for Regency and for Equity One, we would challenge the property taxes on every single property every single year.
Yeah.
So we'd file, you know, 200 appeals every single year on all the properties. You know, it's not worth it for 1 and 2 unit deals. I had an 8-unit building where, you know, my second year of ownership, the real estate tax went up a good amount. And I was getting there with my rents, and as the tenants moved out, I would renovate a unit. As the next tenant moved out, and so my rents were coming up a lot. But I think the taxing authority overdid it, so I'm challenging that one right now. But yeah, there's not much you can do about taxes.
Okay, I only asked it because I had a condo that this is like a while back, so I wasn't anywhere near
Yeah.
any program or anything, it was just whatever, I had a condo, I moved out, I rented it out, and I had homestead on it.
Yeah.
So I was like making a lot of money, and then
Yeah.
like the next year, homestead was gone.
I took away your homestead.
It's like half the money that I was making
Yeah.
every month, yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. And when you're valuing the properties, I mean, you want to look at what the property taxes are today, but once you buy it for the new value, the property tax is going to go up. So as you're doing your modeling and figuring out your rents and your expenses, you could assume the tax will be based off of what you're buying it for. This was a second example. This is talk about utilizing seller financing. This was a 5-unit building in Fort Lauderdale. A lot of challenges, been on market for a long time. There was a cloud on the title, which meant the title wasn't insurable, which means a bank wouldn't finance it. Only 1 unit was rented, which is another reason why the bank wouldn't finance it. It wasn't cash flowing. A very tough neighborhood, and to top it all off, the seller wanted only cash. But it had a lot of potential, right? It was a low price per unit. Units were in decent shape, right? The plumbing and electric wasn't ripped out. It wasn't as bad as the one in Hollywood we just went through. And the one tenant that was there was kind of well known in the neighborhood, and she was kind of watching the property, so it wasn't like people were tearing the place up while I was closing and doing what I needed to do. And it had some great potential rent. There was potential here. This was before pictures.
What year was that?
This was maybe 2013, 2014.
For 150.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but you know, same thing. Like these days, you can find financing on that, and you'd have good rents. Like this, these days, when I bought this, there was no financing and there was no rents. Like you just couldn't do it. You know, it was a blessing when I bought the first couple properties that when I did come time to work with the banks, that my banker had been through the NOVA program. So he was willing to work with me and help me out and guide me and so forth. But I mean, at that time, nobody else would touch on the stuff, and I think he only did it just to be nice. So yeah, the price was lower, but you don't have to get funds to it. So banks wouldn't finance it. It wasn't cash flowing, poor condition, title defect. So what I did, and what you would do if you were buying a property, is you'd meet the seller out there, and you'd have them walk you through the property and all the details and so forth. And when this seller pulled up at the property, you could tell that they weren't comfortable from the jump. It was an older gentleman. He pulled up in a fancy car, you know, long gray hair, kind of like mine's getting. And he didn't want to be there. He was looking around. He was looking over his shoulder. I think he thought he was going to get robbed. And as soon as I saw that, I knew I had him. And so I made sure we spent an hour and a half in the property. We walked through every crevice of every little space, and he's sweating up a storm and still worried about somebody stabbing him from behind. And we climbed up on the roof, and then we spent a half hour interviewing the one tenant that he had, because you could tell he hated talking to his tenants. He wasn't coming there to collect the rent or to lease the space or to do the repairs. She had a laundry list of stuff he hadn't done for her. And we went through every single specific item in painful detail for him. I took him across the street. We hang out with some guys who were drinking beers across the street in the middle of the day, just to make him as uncomfortable as possible. And you could tell from all that, this was just a headache for him. He wanted out of the property. This wasn't what he wanted to be doing. He thought he made a good investment, he timed it well, and now he just wanted to get out because it was over his head. The way I talked with him, listen, this is my track record. This is what I've done before, similar properties in similar neighborhoods. I can do it here too, but you know a bank's not gonna lend on this thing. There's no way, for the reasons I stated. I'd like to help you out, I'd like to take care of this property. I think we can close this property in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, how are you gonna close in 2 weeks? Seller financing, you're gonna give me the money I need to buy this property, but I'll make it easy for you. Right, instead of cutting you a check every month for your interest payment of $100,000, I'll pay it to you up front at closing, so you don't have to think about it for a year and you don't wait for checks in the mail. I'll give you your interest up front, and a year from now I'll pay off your $100,000 and you can be on your way. But in 2 weeks from now you can be done out of this property and not be thinking about it ever again. He agreed to it, and I also, for the $150,000 sales price, I got a commission on the deal. Brokerage commission, so I got 3% of that back, so $4,500. And that wound up being most of the interest that I was going to pay him at closing. So he paid his own interest. So for me to keep the $100,000 for a year, it cost me $1,500.
How did you get a commission?
So if you, does anybody in here have your realtor's license, real estate license? If you don't, I would highly recommend that you get it. It's a week-long course through the state of Florida. It's 40 or 50 hours of class time, then you take a state test. It's $500, $600, and you have the license, and every 2 years you just do a little bit of continuing education, but you have it. And if for no other reason, then when you buy properties for yourself, you can get a commission on the deals that you do for yourself. So even if you are never going to buy investment properties, but you're going to buy your own home one day to live in, get a commission on the home you're buying, right? And that's money you can put towards your down payment on your own home. So the $500, $700 you'll pay for the realtor's license, you'll get that back many times over in just one deal. The deal that I worked out is once you get your real estate license, you got to connect with the broker, and you got to be licensed under a broker. So the deal you do with the broker is you say, most brokers, whatever commissions you get, they'll want 30% of it, 40% of it, it depends, and you keep the rest. But you go to your broker and you say, all right, listen, I'm going to give you 30% in every deal that I do, but on my own deals that I'm doing for myself, I want to keep 100%. Right, so if I buy a house for myself, I might buy an investment property, but I want to keep 100% of those deals myself. And that way, if you get a commission from the state on those deals, then you can put that money right back into your down payment or your renovations or whatever have you. So because I represented myself on this deal, and I didn't have a realtor representing me, I found the property myself. I put in my brokerage's commission fee on the contract. And I mean, it sounds silly because you know you're representing yourself, the seller knows you're representing yourself. I've never had a seller push back on it. So, I mean, every deal I did, even the one I did over Christmas 2 weeks ago, I got a 3% commission on that deal.
So you're buying your deals even today on MLS?
I mean, I still look at them. I bought stuff in the past year on MLS. The one in December wasn't listed though.
So that was, so this, I remember that you said it was listed, but how are you getting commission on an off-market deal? Because you're not.
Yeah, same thing.
Really?
Yeah, you put in the contract, you put the commission on the contract.
Really?
And I think from a seller's point of view, it all factors into the cost of the deal. They know even if it's an unlisted deal, right, but they want to sell it, that a commission is standard. They might have a property manager, they're probably going to pay the property manager commission. I've honestly never had anybody fight back. I mean, it seems like the most obvious thing in the world, right? If I was selling a property and somebody said, oh, I'd like to buy your property, but I also want a commission for buying your property, but nobody's ever fought back. I think a lot of times, right, they're happy to get an offer for the property if it's a fair offer. It just factors in.
Very interesting.
You sold the property after 18 months for $270K. correct?
Yep, so get in there. So seller finance, 100,000 to 150, and I paid 6% interest on 100,000. So the $4,500 commission I got went right back to his interest at closing. At the end of a year, a bank was able to finance it on 130,000, so I had about 30,000 cash to do the next deal, and I had very little money left in this deal. Got it all rented up, and eventually sold it 18 months down the road.
Did you do a 1031 exchange?
So for this, I didn't.
You just paid the capital gains?
I paid the capital gains on it. At this time, my tax situation was such that I think in hindsight, like if this were today, if I sold this deal today, I would do it as a 1031.
Yeah.
But at that time I didn't.
Right.
Yeah. It was a large enough deal. Like at that time, 1031 exchanges weren't tailored to small deals.
Mm-hmm.
So to have a 1031 company do it for you, you have to pay them a good amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And just so you know, right, so a 1031 exchange is if you sell the property, make a profit on that company, you can roll it into a 1031 exchange vehicle, and then you have a certain number of months to redeploy that capital into another property, and you avoid the taxes. These days, the minimums for 1031 exchanges, the companies that want to have come down a lot. So you can do it, you know, if you make a $50,000 profit, you could put it into a 1031,
Mm-hmm.
and the cost for those companies, because they've multiplied, the number of companies doing has multiplied, the costs have shrunk a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So these days, you can do it a lot easier, a lot faster, and a lot cheaper.
Right.
Back to put in. Yeah. Very good question.
The 100,000 was the ask.
So the property was 150,000, but he wasn't going to finance 100% of it. So I said, listen, I have 50,000 I can put into this, but I need you to finance the other 100,000.
Since he was fine, did you ever beat him up on the price? Did you negotiate at all?
Nope, I was fine with the price. I was fine with the price, especially with him doing seller financing. Right, so hey, I'm going to pay you full price for this, but I need you to help me out with the financing for 1 year only.
That property today is worth like $500,000.
Yeah. But still, you know, so the issue with this property is that, so one of the reasons why I sold it is, one, I needed the cash for some other investments that I had like about to close on. But the other reason is that the way this property is structured is that this was built at a time with, I don't know how they crammed 5 units into this little plot of land. And the way the doors open, they all kind of open onto each other in a courtyard. So it was like, man, I had this guy call me up, man, my wife just tried to stab me because she caught me with the girl that was across the way. And it was like stuff like that every single day. And the street at that time was a lot rougher. It's still a rougher street within a rough neighborhood, but this was like something unto itself. I mean, I told you about the guys hanging out across the street, like that was there, like every day, like just hang out there all day. And it's hard to show a property when you got people just at a table hanging out all day across the way. Like they had a TV and extension cord set up over there. They could just chill. So you know, the other reason I sold it was, you know, this was just not where I needed to be spending my time at that time. I still had the full-time job, so I'm doing 40, 50 hours a week at my day job, and then dealing with, you know, my wife tried to stab me. Dude, your marriage is not my problem. Okay, so it's that type of situation. But yeah, I mean, today 5 units over there is, yeah, 500 grand easy.
Is that 5 units a commercial or a residential building?
So more than 4 units is commercial, but it doesn't make much of a difference in this venue, right? That's how it's defined, but it doesn't really do anything different for you. The insurance, if I buy a 5 or 8 unit building, per unit is very similar to a 2 or 3 or 4 unit building. Real estate taxes are same per unit price. So it's a different definition, but it doesn't make much of a difference. Case study 3, it's the last case study. This was a bulk purchase that I picked up. This was end of 2018. This was December 2018. So 4 single-family houses, 480,000. They were smaller, like 2-bedroom, 1-bath houses. The challenge for this one was coming up with the down payment. This was a straight-up deal. This wasn't distressed. The seller actually had a portfolio of like 63 units, and it was all apartments, but he had 4 houses in there. So that was my opportunity. I needed to hold as much cash as possible for a future deal, so I didn't have 144,000. Even if I did, I couldn't pour it all into one deal. Yeah, 65 units. And getting a response from the seller was a nightmare. Like, I reached out once a week for 3 months. Hey, I just want to buy 4 of your 65 units. Just want to buy 4 of them. And then after enough time had gone by, oh, okay, you want to buy 4 of them? Thank God somebody wants to buy some of them. The whole 65 units was way overpriced, so that was an opportunity if we could come up with the right cost. But there was potential. There was value in the units already. They were all rented out of the stable, so I knew from day one I began rents coming in. I'd already created a track record, so it was easy for me to go to the seller and say, listen, you're not going to want to deal with a whole bunch of different buyers of your portfolio, but I can get this thing done quick, I'll get it done good, I've never not closed the deal. Let's make this happen, I know what I'm doing. And at this point, it was like, these were all in the neighborhood where I own a lot of stuff, so it was like, you're looking at the property, oh, I own that one over there, I own the one behind this house, and I own 3 on this street. So it was very easy to say, listen, I can get this done quick, I'm the person I can close this deal with. And funny enough, this same seller is the one that I picked that duplex off of during Christmas week. I bought an 8-unit building from him after this deal, so I'm just picking apart 65 units as cash becomes available. Well, now he's got about 18 left, and I made him an offer for the 18 just recently, because now I got cash for the first time, and but the 18 kind of he thinks they kind of border Wilton Manors, and I don't think that they do, but he thinks that they do, so his price is a lot higher than I could do, but I was able to get the duplex off him for 150, and a commission on that. So he's paying me a commission on this deal, a commission on the 8-unit building, and the 8-unit building commission was like 15 grand, and I got 4,500 bucks on the duplex I just bought.
Nice.
Yeah. And the offer I made on the 18 units had a commission for me too. And by doing a bulk purchase, you get better insurance costs, right? So you're not doing 1 unit, 1 insurance. So I think when I started, the first house I bought, the insurance was like $2 grand a year. And once you get past a certain point, now my insurance costs are like 800 bucks a year per house, 800 or 900 bucks. So it comes down a lot, and it just makes it easier as you're rolling forward. So that's why when you ask a question about cap rates, somebody's taking all the income, subtracting out all the expenses, they may be subtracting whatever for insurance, but you know what your insurance costs are. So they may be marketing it as a 6 cap, but with your lower insurance costs for you off the bat, it's an 8 cap.
As well as management fees as well.
Yeah. So finally, down payment. So this was traditional bank financing. This was First National Bank of South Miami. They're a big lender in this type of space, in a small deal residential space. I've gone to them for 4 or 5 deals now. But they want 30% down, traditional loan. These days, if it's a little bit larger, you can do 25% down for traditional banks. So what I did was, I had been connected with a friend of somebody who was involved with the NOVA program, and they're retired, a real estate person in South Florida, and they had some cash on the sidelines, and they know real estate, and they love real estate, and they loved what I was doing. I talked to them about what I was doing. And so I was able to get a private loan for $80,000 at 8% per year, which 8% is a little bit higher, but there were no closing costs, there were no fees. I got the transaction done in a week. I mean, if my returns on this deal are higher than 8%, then it makes perfect sense. I got the cash back from the seller at closing. So when you negotiate a deal, you make a contract at whatever price, $100,000. But then when you're going through the property and say, man, this needs new windows, new roof, oh, look how bad this is, oh, this is horrible, I don't know if I can get this deal done. But if you can come up with a little bit of money towards these repair costs, you can just do it as a credit at closing. I think we can close this out. So get 10 grand back from the seller at closing, and that money at closing goes right to your bottom line. That's your down payment, that's your renovation, that's whatever you need it to be. Combine that with the private loan, with the commission from seller at closing. So the total cash I was able to raise, not from myself, was $104,000 towards closing. So I had to put out 40 grand. The breakdown's at the bottom, and you get a return of 57%. So I'm borrowing my money at 8%, I get 57% return on it, so it more than pays for itself. Any questions on this?
Yeah, is he staying in that deal at 8%?
So this wasn't deal specific for him. So he lent me the money,
Oh.
So when I take out of this deal, I'll use it for the next deal, use it for the next deal, and so forth.
So how long is the 80K yours? Like, like he just.
We do like a new 2-year term, every couple of years, and, for now, he wants to keep rolling it, so I can still make a lot more than 8%, so I'm keeping it rolling.
Why not raise the full amount? Why put your own money down?
I don't like to over leverage myself, and that's true for my portfolio as a whole. It's a careful balance between, using so little of your own cash that everything you got is riding on the next deal, versus saving some of your own cash and putting some of your own cash into it, so at least you're protected. If you finance 100% of a deal or 90% of a deal and the market turns, or a tenant doesn't pay you rent for 3 months, then you're losing the deal. I mean, even for my portfolio as a whole, currently I'm leveraged at maybe 55–60%. Right? You really don't want to finance too much because it just leaves you so vulnerable to even small shifts.
But if your cash flow covers your debt service, by like half, like a 1.5 DCR, then you shouldn't be.
I mean, if you're borrowing 100% of the deal, you're probably not going to cover it at 1.5.
Well, like you get your
DCR.
traditional loan, and then you raise the down payment from your private guy, and then if it covers it, and you still get half the cash flow, even though you don't have much equity, you basically have the property for free.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can. And people do, right? People do this with 100% of somebody else's money. That's just not how I prefer to do it, right? I prefer to be safe. I want to make sure I can sleep at night. I want to make sure I have enough to cover it. And it shows good faith, right? If you're borrowing money from somebody and they're, you're saying, I want you to finance 100% of this deal, that doesn't show them that you have a whole lot of confidence in the success of this thing. So you want to show them, listen, I'm putting my own money too. I have skin in the game. And that's true of your styles. That's true of any big developer also. Is any investors that you work with are going to want to see you have skin in the game.
From a financing standpoint, your private lender became an investor, and theoretically, if he keeps rolling into it. Interesting. And that was just based off the relationship and track record, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's debt, it's not equity.
Correct. So the other good thing about this, right? So if it was deal specific, right? If you took an investor for a specific deal, then they get their interest paid, but they get a percentage of that deal too. So if they're coming in for 100% of the deal, then they're going to say, all right, well, listen, whatever you pay my interest each month, but I also want 50% of the profits. With this, 100% of the profits are mine after I get this 8% every year. Right, so one of the keys of this, I'm going to talk about it in the next section, alternative funding sources, but if you can, at least when you're starting out, maintain as much control and as much of the profits on these deals as you possibly can, then that's all the more money you have to invest in the next one.
Have you ever gave equity out?
I have not. I have not. And the further you get along with what you're doing, the less need there is for it. If I was doing a big development deal where you're going to sell stuff off, then maybe I would do a deal like that, structure it that way. But the less you need the cash, it's like a real irony of real estate investing. The less you need the cash, the cheaper and more available it is. All right, section 3, alternative funding sources. I thought this was a great quote, simply because of the fact that when you're seeking capital for deals, you're seeking investors to be part of. It really is just about making a ton of phone calls to find the best deal you can get. Even these days when I'm financing much larger deals, it's finding the bank with the right rates. It's getting rejected by 7 or 8 banks who, they lend on multifamily, but we don't lend on 40 individual houses as a package, right? So it's really just shaking as many trees as you can to get the right answer that you need. So alternative funding sources. These are, just as a precursor, I'm not recommending these, I'm not a financial advisor, but I mentioned when I got started, it was about as scrappy as you could get. So this is like the nitty gritty, most scrappy way of coming up with whatever cash you need to get that first deal done. And then once you get that first deal done and you're generating your rents, then it's much easier to get the second one done. And then you're generating more rents, and the third one gets easier and so forth. But this is, when I started out, I was broke, so I needed to find as much money as I could anywhere that I could. The first and most obvious place to look is friends and family. It may not be friends and family who have big pockets of money, but But if it's friends and family real close to you, and you've been explaining to them, and they've been with you on your journey, as you're establishing your track record, and they say, oh man, this guy got involved in real estate 5 years ago at his company he was working for, and you know, she started doing small deals, and then bigger and bigger and bigger. She really knows and understands real estate. She's got a realtor's license. She's got designations in the industry, right? Then it makes the conversation easy with friends and family. It doesn't have to be big money. It can be little money that you pull from different places and put together into a larger pile with what you have on your own. But I think, you know, for me, what I've learned over time is that, you know, you approach it as a real loan the same way you would a bank. So you have it written up, you have it formalized, you pay your interest on time, you treat it the same way you would treat anything else. Because once you pay them back in 6 months or a year, whatever you work out with them, it may be beneficial for you to go back to them 3 years down the road or 2 years down the road. Maybe, you know, at that point you've got a lot more under your belt, but you've got to close on these 3 deals. And you love all 3 deals, but you only have enough cash for 2 deals. Your business is doing great, but you just, I'd love to get this 3rd one too. And you can go back to it if you treated the relationship well. I had a friend that had inherited a home from his grandmother when she passed away, and he had a good amount of equity in the home because he inherited it. So he was able to get a home equity line of credit at like 3%. I was able to borrow the money from him at 8%. So it was great for him. He was up in Boston. He wasn't doing anything else. He was a sheet metal worker. So it wasn't like he wasn't investing with the money, and made him a great return, and it worked out to be a win-win. The same rules apply, you know, as regular family and friends stuff, as you have it written up, you have it documented, and you take care of it. You know, an easy one for me when I was first starting out, the first couple years, is I had my day job, so you have a 401k for your day job. And again, this is not investment, you know, advice related to your retirements, but you can borrow from your 401k at 2 and 3%. It's really cheap money. If you're earning, you know, 40, 50% returns on it, you know, for me it felt like a sin to leave it in the 401k. And if you just do a loan, you don't have to take taxes on it. You're paying back interest to yourself, and then you pay it back over time, right from your paycheck. But these things allow you to retain full control over your deal. And for me, when I started out, I was working a day job for a big company, so I knew what it was like to have to get approvals on stuff. I knew it was like to have to manage people. For my own deals, I didn't want to have to go to anybody. I want 100% control myself, and things like this allow you to do that. Yeah.
How much money I know it completely depends, but how much money realistically would you say you'd need to really like get into your first deal?
And so,
Like of your personal money.
so good question. So duplex I just bought, right, 150 grand. So I was able to finance 80% of it. So I had to come up with, it was 30 grand. I got a $4,500 commission from the seller on it. So I needed 25 grand. So for those 2 units, I was able to come up to 25 grand plus a couple grand for closing costs. The rents on the duplex are $1,050 a side, so $2,100 combined. After my mortgage payments, real estate tax, insurance, I'm netting maybe $1,100 a month.
And you got that you got that, I know you got that financed through the bank then?
Yeah, so this was financed, correct, this was financed.
Conventional?
So this one was, and we'll get to it next, but this was a hard money loan, was the one I did for that one. So it used to be, if you got hard money, that hard money was at like 10 to 12%. So hard money kind of acts like a bank, it's the same documents as a bank, but it's a much higher interest rate. It's just on LLC, so your personal name's not guaranteeing it, but they can close deals in like 3 weeks. So it's a higher interest rate. These days, there's been more companies doing it, but if you have excellent credit, the interest rates have come down to like 6, 6.25.
It's
For hard money?
For hard money.
Is it
How many points?
That was a 0.5 point. Yeah.
Is it would it be through just like a private lender then, or is it bigger banks that are doing hard monies as well?
So the hard money is kind of it's in between, right? So it's not big banks and it's not private guys. You know, the hard money guys, lender that I work with, you know, they do 20 million a year in debt. So they're not big guys, but they're not small guys either. I mean, I'm working with Pacific National Bank now. They do 60 million a year in debt, and that's a real legit bank on Brickell.
Mm-hmm.
So 20 million is significant, but not huge.
Would they look more so on the deal then?
Yeah.
on if they would lend it, to say, okay, this deal makes a lot of sense. Just I think it's like the hardest part is the first one because you don't really have, you know, a lot of the background in order to get the money, you know?
Correct. So if it was your first deal with them, but your credit was still excellent, right, you might pay a little bit more interest rate if it was the first deal, but once you get a track record, it comes down. But even on a first deal, they do an appraisal of the property it's worth and what kind of rents you get. So they're just factoring it on if this deal makes sense. So for that deal where I'm netting, you know, $1,100 a month on the 25 grand I put in, it's like a 50% return on investment. And I only needed 25,000 out of the pocket for the deal. Yeah. So this is category 2, right? Slightly more formal. So you have, so there's private lenders, right? So Discover, the same people who do credit cards, right? They also have a private lending group. So you can call them up and they loan up to 35 grand. Their interest rates are still high. They're like 8 to 12% if you have great credit, sometimes more, but it's just personal to you. So it's no deal related, nothing on the deal, it's just to lend you that cash. The repayment term is like 5 to 6 years. And it's kind of expensive, right? If you're at 12% and it's only a 5-year term, then the monthly payment on 35 grand is like 600 bucks. So it's high. So I think the key with some of this is you want to pay it off as soon as you can, right? Which is why if you're taking, you know, that profit every month on the property for your living expenses, it's going to take you a long time to pay it off. If you're taking that rent every month and putting it towards paying off some of the short-term stuff, then it just gives you more in the long run. Peer-to-peer lending. Now there's a proliferation of peer-to-peer lending sites like Lending Club. There's specific real estate lending sites that'll lend on deals. Back when I started, even up to 3 years ago, there was so much less. And you guys can probably find a lot more resources on this, but there are deal-specific sites, and then there's just peer-to-peer lending sites. And it winds up being, you know, same type of setup as the private lenders.
I wanted to go back to the IRAs. Have you ever considered doing a self-directed IRA?
So, so we talked earlier, you asked a question, right, about the tax benefits of not selling the property for some. So once you're established, you have a couple properties, you can set up, if you don't have a 401k through your day job, you can set up a small business 401k. And the small business 401k, you can put into like up to $55,000 a year into it. And so that shelters that $55,000 a year that you've made off of your rent from paying taxes on it. And then you can loan it back out to yourself for the next deal. So I do have a small business 401k that I utilize.
But I'm talking about a specific self-directed IRA where you can invest in alternative investments.
So there are, I mean, I'm not an expert at the self-directed IRAs. I'm familiar with them. Usually if you're going to use them for alternative investments, there's minimums involved. And the money has to go back into your IRA, and the terms are a little bit different. So it's not as you don't have the flexibility and freedom with it, and there are minimums. So that's never been something that I've just had a lot of experience with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just really quickly to recap, you're saying that, let's say you could put up the 50,000 of the profits of, you know, your rents into this 401k, not paying any interest on it, but if you wanted to lend that 50,000 out to get into something else, you would just have to pay a 1 to 2% interest on that
To yourself.
to yourself.
Correct.
That's it.
Yeah.
But now you don't have to pay any taxes on 50,000.
Correct.
Really?
It's pretty great, huh?
Good little trick.
Yeah, it's a good little
And
trick.
you can open up a 401k through that specific LLC business. Then?
So you have to have a couple. So the way it works, so you have to have enough rent coming in where it's worthwhile. So you have a couple properties, and you can't have a 401k from your day job, like an active one that you're contributing to and your employer's contributing to. But yeah, you can open it up. TD Bank has one that's no cost, and then every time you want to borrow from it, it's like a flat, $100 fee to the bank. But there's no, monthly fees on it, and it allows you to borrow. Not all of them will allow you to borrow, and some of the ones that do allow you to borrow charge monthly fees and so forth. So you got to find a bank that allows you to borrow it back,
Gross,
and
low
it doesn't
percent.
cost anything.
Which TD Bank you said does?
Yeah, there's one right on Los Olas.
So why not put all your profits there?
You can only do
So
50,000.
you can only do 50. Yeah, it's like 55 grand a year, and it's only if that 55 grand you're paying taxes on anyways. So say you're buying properties, you're doing a lot of renovations, you're putting all your money back into renovations, you're already getting the tax benefits from it. So that 55 grand is only if at the end of the year, it's like, man, I haven't spent this money that I made in rent, and I'm gonna have to pay taxes on it, and let me throw it into the 401k. Yeah. And then acquisition commissions, which we talked about in depth, and it's the same thing on larger properties. My 8-unit deal, there's like a, I don't know, $15,000 commission or something, and that got to go towards the down payment. We talked about some of the more traditional sources from prior acquisitions, from traditional banks. These days, if you're doing a larger deal, some banks will do 80%. A lot of banks are throttling back a bit because they might feel like the economy's at its peak at the moment. So like First National in South Miami was up to like 75%. Now they're back to like 65%. I'm doing a deal with Pacific National now that's at 70%. But with them, if it was like a 10-unit apartment building, they do 75%. A lot of the hard money guys now, the private lenders, will do up to 80%, maybe up to 90%. You're going to have higher interest rates with the 90%. The 80%, like I did on that duplex, interest rates are still pretty good. Have come down an awful lot. And then seller financing, I love seller financing when I can get it. And the benefit of seller financing, it gives you some time to work with that seller in a little bit more depth, build up some trust. So if they seller finance you on one property and they own other properties in the neighborhood, it makes it so easy. If you make it an easy and fast and complete transaction for them, then it's very easy to go to them and say, hey, I have another deal for you, another deal. The guy with the 60-something units where I bought 4 houses and then 8 and then 2 more. And that wasn't seller financing, but you just built their relationships and you can keep going back to that well a lot. And it's ideal for sellers that really just want to be out, and you don't encounter that sometimes. Somebody else's headache is your dream. If you can find those situations, it works out well. In conclusion, we talked through the initial setup steps, developing your network, developing your concept, and then you saw throughout the presentation how important that track record was that we kept coming back to and that utilized so much of what you did to build on itself. We talked about creating value, using the resources you have, seller financing, down payment options, and then we talked about the different funding sources that you have available. Any questions?
What's the most memorable experience you've had so far?
My son's here, so there's stuff that we could talk about as adults.
You might want to
yeah, there's been a lot of unusual situations that I've encountered. There was a deal where the cops had set up there was a police substation near one of the properties, and the police had arranged to do a fake gun buy on the property. So they had sold, it was an AK-47, it was a big, assault rifle type thing, and they did the transaction on the property, and as soon as they sold it, they went in and tackled the guy, and I just happened to be on the property, collecting rent or checking on something, and I saw the guys talking in the corner, and then the cops swarm in, and they arrest the guy, and you see the gun get thrown to the side, and I talked to him after, it wasn't loaded, but it's like, come on, buddy, like, how do you know the buyer's not bringing his own clip? Throws it in that thing. But yeah, so that was something that I witnessed that was really eventful at the 5-unit building that I sold, and that was kind of like, man, when they're setting up gun buys on your property because they know that's like it'll fly, that's like a property where it's like, man, do I want to spend my time on this? So that's one example. I had another example where, at the 5-unit building again, that one tenant who was there was a professional dancer. And no judgment, whatever, how you feed your family, but she was a dancer, and so whenever she paid her rent, it was in a stack of $1 bills. That was like that. So I'd come home with a stack of $1 bills, and it was like, my wife's like, what are you doing? And I had a Ziploc bag because it's dirty and such, and then I had to take the stack of $1, you don't know how much like $700 is until it's in singles. And then you gotta take it to the bank and try to force it under the teller window and have them count it, and the guy's like, oh, it's $693. I'm not counting it again, just put it in my account, we'll call it 7. Yeah, so there's been a million stories. If any of you, so my office is just south of the tunnel on Federal Highway. And it's more of like a clubhouse than an office, just me and a partner. And so we have scotch, we have a fridge with beer, we have a PlayStation for my son. So if you ever want to stop by the office, I can tell you a lot more stories over a drink. And that goes for anybody here. What do you got?
What brought you to get into real estate?
You know, when I was in college, I worked as a lifeguard. And the lifeguards worked for a management company, and I just wanted to be the boss. So I said, well, these guys work for a management company, we'll work for the management company. And it was a management company that did associations, condo association stuff. And then I realized, well, they weren't really the boss. It was the 7 board of directors at the 14 properties you managed. So you had like 100 and something bosses. But I picked up a lot of knowledge about real estate. So I said, all right, well, this is great, but how do I do it and be my own boss? So I moved from the associations to commercial. And at commercial, you get to be your own boss. Even if you have bosses, you're running the properties, you're running the vendors, you're running the maintenance, the leasing staff, or whatever, if you're the asset manager. So you get to run the show, right? It's like your own small business. And when I was working at REE Equity One, and I had 35 shopping centers, whatever was in my portfolio, we run like 35 companies. And that was like the greatest thing in the world. But there was always that rub where it's like you would get a deal done, or you'd renovate a space and you were making a ton of money from the company, right? You get a great lease done, you build out the space, and you've increased the value of that property by $2 million, right? Or you negotiate a great rent increase on a Home Depot option or something, right? And it's like, wow, you're making great money, but you're always making it for someone else. You say, man, well, I have this skill set, and I'm gonna keep getting paid my same salary for the next 45 years. So I started buying properties, and it actually worked out well because so Regency Centers ended up acquiring Equity One. So I've been with Equity One for like 8 years, and Regency came in, and we had planned a family summer trip. Every summer we'd go away for a month, different part of the world. And so I planned to resign when the summer trip was coming up, but I wanted, so the company was being acquired, and I went to my boss, and the Regency was offering the buyout package. You get like a year of your pay, you get your bonus and stuff, they lay you off. So I went to my boss, I said, I'd love to get laid off if I could. And he said, nope, it's already been decided. So they kept me on, and which was fine. I got to transition my team and so forth. And it was like 2 weeks before I was about to resign, because we had this trip to go on. And they called me in, and they had fired, it was me, the vice president of construction, the vice president of leasing. So they laid the 3 of us off, like 2 weeks before I was about to go on this trip. So I got the whole, the full package anyways. If they just waited like a day, I was gonna quit and get nothing. Yeah, it was like it was the most lucky thing that could ever happen to a human. I mean, aside from having beautiful children and so forth. Financially, it was like great. But it was one of those things where if I hadn't been building up the properties over all those years and hadn't been ready to go out on my own, then your company being acquired, man, you've been through that, is an absolute nightmare. And it was like 2 weeks before Christmas, so everybody who worked for me is like, man, am I gonna have money to buy presents for my kids? What's gonna happen in the new year? We're gonna get our end of year bonuses. It was a nightmare. And I'm going to my boss saying, hey, I could be fired if you want. So it was just a game changer, right? Having this on the side while I was doing that made all the difference in the world.
Personally, right now, do you care more about the equity that you keep rolling or the cash flow that you're generating?
It's both. It's the same, right? It's the same. The cash flow that I'm generating has to be enough to make the deals work. Mm-hmm. And the more cash flow that I can generate, the more equity and the faster I can build it up. So I care about both. After a while, it does get trickier and trickier, right? Once you're so many deals in, to keep rolling at the same initial pot, so you rely over time more and more on the rents that you're getting. Mm-hmm. So the rolling becomes a smaller portion, but the rents become a higher portion. But all of it still gets piled back in.
So like right now, is there a percentage that you're comfortable with like removing from the business from the cash flow to live on, or is there like other means? Is that completely separate still?
Yeah, not yet. I'm lucky that my wife works and is successful with her career. When I get commissions on deals, I don't always put the commissions back into the deals. Mm-hmm. So if I'm getting a leasing commission, maybe I'll keep that for myself. If I'm doing a third-party, leasing deal, right? If I'm helping somebody else buy a building and I'm not buying it myself, and I get a commission on that, right? I'll keep that kind of fun thing, keep things going. But as far as the actual rents coming in and the deals themselves,
Wow.
you know, thankfully for now, I can keep rolling it.
When you finance properties, are you doing a 15-year or 30-year?
So if you go with a traditional bank, it'll be a 25-year term. It'll be amortized over 25 years. The term may be 7 years, maybe 10 years. So at 7 years or 10 years, you have to either refinance or pay it off, but spread over at 25 years. A lot of the hard money guys, it's like a 30-year amortization. So it's same as like a home mortgage that you buy, it's spread over 30 years, so the payments are a little lower, but you're paying more interest over time. But that's, I think, pretty standard. Hard money's 25, hard money's 30, traditional banks are 25. And for the traditional banks, you know, one thing to look out for is that, you know, they'll fund more deals than they used to. So now they, you know, they fund a 4-unit deal or a 3-unit deal. They fund a duplex. But you want to make sure, right, you know, that term that you have with the bank, only a part of that is going to, the interest rate is going to be fixed for. So if the interest rate is only fixed for the first couple of years and then it floats with the market, you just want to try to get that fixed period as long as you can, especially these days where the interest rates are as low as they are.
Having your experience at Regency, what's your opinion on long distance landlording versus localized?
You know, with the big shopping centers, it's different, right? Your tenants are Home Depot and Publix and Starbucks, and these guys know what they're doing. And if you have a good staff, I mean, you can't be at that many properties spread across Dade and Broward, you know, all in one day. So, you know, you're forced to make choices and you work with people that you have and the team that you have. You know, for my own stuff, I still to this day manage everything 100% myself. I don't trust anybody else with my money, my rents, with my tenants. Just knowing that tenants are getting a great experience. If they call for a maintenance item, I'll answer the phone and there's somebody there. If somebody else is managing the property for you, you don't always know that. And that's going to be reflected, you know, maybe not in day one, but when it comes time for renewal, they're not going to stay. I have tenants that have been with me 8 years, 9 years. You know, 4 and 5 years are common, and that's very unusual in this business and this market that I'm in. But if you do incredible renovations, you treat the folks well, you handle their finances well. Like anybody, you know, somebody has a problem with their rent or the late fee or whatever, straight up with them. This is how it is. This is why I did this. You know this. And if it's somebody who, you know, is in trouble every month for several months, you get to know them and you say, listen, you're straight up with it. It's much easier than going through a management company who's fiddling around with it. Maybe they have other priorities other than your priorities, and you don't get to know the folks as well. So I like managing it myself.
Are you familiar with Section 8 at all?
Yeah, so Section 8 is a program, it's through the federal government, but it's administered locally, where if you have a tenant, if you market your property for rent and a tenant shows up, they could have a Section 8 voucher. And a Section 8 voucher means that the federal government will pay a portion of their rent for them every month. Sometimes it's 100%, sometimes it's 40%, but you'll get the check from the government. And they have to inspect the property before the person moves in. And, you know, there's standards you got upkeep and so forth, but it's like minimal stuff. It's like making sure the window's closed and the locks work and whatever. And some landlords love Section 8 because they know that the federal government's going to direct deposit into their account on the 3rd of every month that check for the portion that they're paying. I have in my portfolio maybe 6 Section 8 tenants. I personally don't feel that there's any benefit to it. I think that for the paperwork that you got to do for the government, and then minutia having to deal with them and their response time and all those things whenever there's an issue, it's not my speed. And even if they pay 60% of tenants for under 70%, it's never the first 60% that's a problem, right? If you have a tenant who's a regular tenant, anybody, even if they're having a rough month, can come up with half their rent or 60% of their rent. It's always that top piece that's the most difficult portion anyways. So even if I get to 70%, I mean, I had a tenant who rent was like $1,200 a month, and the federal government was paying like, I don't know, $1,165 of that. So she paid $35 a month. Maybe like 8 months, and I won't get the rent from her. And I was like, man, it's like, and you get tired of $35. Like, how much do I need to call this person this month to get my $35? But after 8 months, it's like, well, you want me to evict you over $700? You know what I mean? It was like, and there's been a lot of those situations where even if somebody's paying 90% of your rent, like I'm having trouble collecting the other 10%. Whereas with tenants that aren't Section 8, that I can vet myself, that have, steady, rental history, steady housing history, those tenants I can vet a lot more myself. Whereas a Section 8 tenant, you know, is more difficult. So I try to be sensitive, right? If it's an, you know, an older person, right? If it's a person with kids, if it's, right? You don't want to give those people the opportunity that anybody else has to be able to live in a great apartment, a great place. But I don't know that I love Section 8 the way that some landlords, you know, rave about it. I'm indifferent.
How much do the rents fluctuate with Section 8?
You know, so in a tough market, Section 8 rents serve as almost like a floor for the market as a whole. Because if Section 8 is willing to pay you $1,200 a month for a 2-1, then everybody else in the market over time has to come up to that, or else only Section 8 will get rented to.
Mm-hmm.
So it acts as like in the macroeconomic picture, it acts as a floor of sorts. And if the economy takes a downturn and rents are dipping, the Section 8 rents will dip a lot lower than the regular. Will dip a lot slower than the regular rents.
They will.
Yeah, because they only reassess once a year, and at that they use a housing index, which is like a lagging indicator. So that data is also like a year old. So you'd have to be 2 or 3 years into a decent sized recession for the rents to turn downward, unless they make some kind of change to the calculation formula.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing about Section 8 rents is sometimes they're ahead of where your market rents are. So maybe for a Section 8 tenant, you might be able to get $50 more a month for a place than you would otherwise. But I find that really mostly applies to the places that are kind of dumpster begin. Right? If you've got a junky place, you haven't renovated, put money into it, you're going to get $800 a month because it's the junkiest thing on the street. Maybe Section 8 will pay $1,000 for it. If I renovate my place is nice, I'm going to get $1,000 no matter what, whether it's from Section 8 or somebody else. Right? So it benefits landlords who don't do anything with their places the most.
Mm-hmm.
As silly as that sounds.
I thought Section 8 used the area median rate.
They use a formula, and the data it's public. It's published online, so it's public data. But they have a certain calculation formula that has to do with it's a housing index, it's a zip code. There's a zip code calculation. It's a couple different things go into it, and it's published by the federal government. And then the local tax authorities use like a derivative of that. So I don't know. I could tell you precisely how it's done, but they publish it each year and say this is what your rents are for a certain zip code for a certain type of house.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned you like managing your own properties, but have you ever thought of expanding, say, 3 hours away to Brevard County and hiring a property manager and getting properties, because they're a lot cheaper than Miami or Broward than they are.
Yeah.
And
So
get better properties sometimes.
yeah. So I had a good, education. So I had a 5-unit building in West Palm. That's the only other building that sold. And 5-unit building in West Palm, when I was working in North Miami Beach for my day job, to get to West Palm, it's like an hour, it's like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But after your 45-hour work week,
Yeah.
and your kids and everything else, you're like, that hour and a half can seem like forever.
Right.
So that's why I sold that one. And I did have a management company doing that. And the management company, the guy knew the neighborhood well, and he was well known. But I think that, he was kind of partial to helping out the tenants just to keep his name good in the neighborhood. And when I had a tenant who wouldn't pay, he kind of relocated him to one of his other properties that he had another landlord with.
Right.
Right? He was just hustler, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. He's running his thing. But that was difficult. I have 3 houses up in Orlando right now that I bought about 18 months ago. And so far those have been good, right? They return good money, and I just lucked out with 3 tenants that are great, so I'm not making a lot of trips up there. But even up there, I'm relying on another agent to find the properties for me, because if you're on the South Florida MLS, you can't get on the Orlando MLS unless your broker also has an Orlando office.
Right.
So they make it difficult. So he's got to find the stuff for me, and he can't find it as well as I can because of just the experience that he built up in a certain neighborhood. And he's only, the deals up there, I'm buying houses I bought the house like 80 grand or 85 grand, so his commission's like, $2,500. So it wasn't inspiring for him to go find me more properties. And then, even Orlando, the market, after I bought those 3, I planned to buy, 8 or 10 up there. But it was like, as soon as I bought those 3, the market just went up by like 25 grand. And so it's just, I know there's some other places, but in Orlando at least, which is a market I'm familiar with, your rent to what you're paying for the property, that ratio is very comparable to South Florida these days. And if you're paying the additional expense of having a property manager up there, and which can be 10% on all these properties,
Right.
and you've got to make a lot of trips up there,
Right.
it's difficult for me to make it worth it. I think in a couple of years I'd probably sell those 3 just because I just keep acquiring them here. It makes it less worthwhile, but you can do it. It's tricky.
Yeah.
And if you have a problem tenant, like I've had tenants here where then you really want to be driving by the property every day until they get rid of them. So it could be 3 weeks of driving by the property every day just to make sure everything's okay, or showing up unannounced at night, or whatever the case, and you can't do it when it's 3 hours away. And my property manager up there is going to do it.
Right.
Yeah, 2 questions. What percentage of your properties are rented? And what process do you use when you're looking for tenants?
Yeah, good question. So right now, I mean, 100% is rented right now. The duplex I just bought, I was able to rent out one side before I even closed on the property. And then the other side, I'm renovating this week, so it'll be rented next week, but that's the only, you know, I have some transitional vacancy like that. I have some vacancy when, if I have a tenant that's way under market, and they made some late payments that year, and they're just not being a great tenant, then I'll move them out and get in somebody who's higher paying. But no, there's never any vacancy, luckily at this time. I think it helps that the interiors of my places are extremely nice. So I do, you know, 20-inch porcelain tile floors. I do brand new white kitchens with all the molding and everything, new appliances, you name it. So even when there is vacancy in the market, it's not my places that are vacant, at least right now. Now listen, if there's a downturn and you know, things change and the market has 20% vacancy, then my answer will be different. But I hope that because my properties are nicer inside and I have relationships with my folks, that mine won't dip as much as everybody else. And you wind up having tenants who, you know, I have tenants who moved out 4 years ago, who were with me maybe 2 years, they were in a 1-1, they moved into something bigger, or they moved to Dade, and now they're coming back to Broward, and they have a bigger family, so they call me up and say, hey, I'm moving back, we had a great relationship, what do you have? The duplex I rented out the 1 year before it closed, Broward County Housing has an elderly services division.
Elderly?
Elderly, yeah. And so they found me a tenant, 72-year-old gentleman, and they pay the rent for him every month. And so he moved in as soon as I finished. He moves in Monday, so I finished the renovation Wednesday last week, so it'll be vacant for 4 days. He moves in Monday, and they pay 100% of the rent for him. But he signed the lease back, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago when I was still closing. Even
2 more
before it's
questions.
renovated. Yeah.
Let's some other people go.
Yeah.
How do you handle the ownership of all your properties? Are they all owned by the LLC? Do you set up different ones for each property?
Yeah, good question. So when I was with Regency and Equity One, every shopping center was its own LLC. I try to group them, so I have like 7 houses in one LLC, 4 houses in another. So I do like that. So maybe I have 6 or 7 LLCs overall. But you wind up they all roll up into, C. Murphy Holdings company, right? And that's the one that you pay your taxes on. And then you have a separate company over here that doesn't own any properties but collects all the rent and pays all the bills. So that way, if there's a slip and fall on your property and they pierce the insurance, then they can only go after the LLC for that specific property or that group of properties. But that group of properties doesn't have any income or expenses anyways because it's over in the management company. And even if they do pierce it, and they do pierce that, then you hope that they don't pierce the master holding company that separates it from,
Right.
Your house and your dog and those things, right? But yeah, so that's how I group it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you manage all this in terms of software and staff? And how do you get organized to manage all by yourself?
It's not as hard as it seems. And once you know what you're doing, it goes pretty quick. I don't have anything special I do. I think the one thing that I do that's different than a lot of landlords in the neighborhood is they'll collect cash or they'll have the payment sent to a PO box or something. Most of my tenants pay every month through Venmo. I also give out my bank account information, so if they don't pay through Venmo, if they're older or they're not as comfortable with it or they don't have a bank account, they can deposit their rent every month at any BB&T branch. And then they send me a text, hey, I just deposited $1,000, and I text them back, received it. So if you can streamline the collection process, that makes everything else easier. I got 2 crews of guys that do my renovations and repairs for me. I don't write them checks, I wire them the money. That makes it easier. We take, every summer we take a couple weeks off and we go somewhere else in the world, so I'm able to manage it from wherever we happen to be with the laptop. It's not so bad. Yeah, it's not so bad. When you come from, if you're managing shopping centers and stuff, when I was at Equity One, we had over 300 tenants. And yeah, I had help and support staff and stuff, but you have to know everything on those 300 tenants no matter what. Who pays their rent late, who's paying this, who's doing this. So having, 50 something is much easier. That
Thank
answer?
you.
Great.
Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate it.
And, if you guys have any questions, you want to, send me a text, hit me up on the email, swing by my office, whatever works. I'm happy to help and whatever I can do to answer any questions, anything else you think of.
And do you mind if I send out the PowerPoint slides to the students?
Some of it, right, because it contains the financial stuff and so forth, and some of the deals might be a little bit specific, but I can come up with something.
Okay.
I can get you something.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Take about a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll get started.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, what's the
I think 100 maintenance guy in this place.
That's a big question. I think you got to look at places that are a little bit unusual. I have one of my main crews that worked for me when I was at Equity One. He would work on nights and weekends for me also. My other crew, it's a guy and his wife.
Yeah, that's nice. Yes.
So they can't get a lot of work in a lot of different places, and they start off just cutting grass for me, and over time, we work on bigger and bigger stuff, and now they do everything. And it works out. It's a little more challenging for me. It's like, don't know sign, and it's difficult to communicate, but it's great for them. It works out very well, and no one else has got poached from it, and they do great work. Yeah, so just I would,
Lucky on that.
yeah, I think you gotta find the unusual places, but you'll see them, right? You might see a guy cutting grass in your neighborhood. Ask them what they do. Pull over. I'm pulling over all the time. If I see somebody collecting junk in the neighborhood, hey, what else you do? You live around here, and then you try them out once, and if they're no good, then forget about it and try somebody else. Yeah.
That's been a mission in this around area. Someone that's reliable and do some maintenance.
You can find them, and it gets easier as you grow because you have more work for them. If you can keep them busy, like when I first started, it was like, man, I would just look for projects to do. I did a renovation for my mentor. I didn't make any money on it, but just to keep my guys working busy so they could keep earning money, and they appreciate that, and that'll make dividends. I think it's something you.
What was your? You tried to put the number, but it.
Yeah, 301-213. 9692.
9692. Yeah. I actually I work with on acquisitions for like single families, duplexes, like that with a company in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
I just started like acquisition managing, but we do like.
What's the company?
Home venture investments.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I do, yeah.
Really? Do you get our
I do.
You get our wholesalers?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
And I think I bought a few deals.
Really? From Tall and Eric?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm acquisitioning with them, but I'd love to at some point maybe meet with you.
Hit me up and swing by.
Yeah, awesome.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I should put my contact stuff up on the board just in case somebody wants to reach out.
Okay. Actually, don't.
Okay.
But I can, I can actually send it out as an email.
Yeah, it's email. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you again. Same here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was really good.
Thank you.
Bye. sharing, right? How do you use this?
That is a whole like 8-week conversation we could have. How to
But
use this.
I know-
It's not
I know-
that simple.
I know what's going, I know it's wrong, but it's just like, you know, there are periods it's doing it monthly, not yearly. How do you change this to make it yearly?
Yeah. You know what? I grabbed a TI. Can we trade for the duration of the class?
What?
Can we trade for the duration of the class?
Well, for today, yeah.
Yeah, I'm more familiar with this one. I brought my TI.
So how do you change it, how do you change the periods to make it yearly, not monthly?
You know what? This is gonna be great for me as well.
Did Chase finish the program?
He took this last year.
So-
Yeah, how
Oh,
do
he
you-
did, okay, so, okay.
Sure.
But he's still in the program,
Yeah,
right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I have a, okay, whatever it is, right?
That's your present value. yeah.
Exactly. Then I have my payment, it's zero, so zero payment. Right.
I wanna dump
Then
that
I have
guy,
my,
like I said, there's no
fixed
money.
whatever.
You want what?
I wanna
So it's
dump it.
9
Oh.
on this
There's no
one,
money,
Yeah.
we
which is
don't
one.
own this
So now I
business.
need to put the number of periods, but if I put the number of periods, I put it at 10, it's doing it monthly, it's not doing it annually.
Well, depending on how you have it set up, if you do like one shift
Just a fancy
per
business
year,
card.
Oh,
payment
how
per
do you
year,
do that?
or you do 12 shift
Oh, okay.
payment per year. So that's the amount of payment you do per year.
Okay, but I have it here and I change it, but it makes it 120, and it doesn't it's like exactly the same thing. It's calculated
Because
differently.
you probably have it at a different amount of payment per year. So you want 1 per year or 12?
You feel what?
No, I just wanted to make it as one, because it's yearly, it's really
Then
easy.
you do one shift.
Yes.
Oh, you mean the grade?
Zero, zero, zero.
That does put you in that does put you in
Zero.
a spot.
Payment, but it's due for a year.
No, you don't have to.
Yeah, because,
No, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Your payment is different from your payment is like your monthly or your annual payment. Your payment per year is your amortization.
We're still missing a couple of people, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. All right. So a couple of, obviously a couple of you are new. Some of you have obviously been in the program for a little while, so you kind of understand, at least in my classes, kind of how things work. So the way this class is set up, there are 8 weeks. At the end of each class session, we have a quiz, okay? You've been given basically the quiz, your response sheet, the answer sheet for all 8 quizzes. There are going to be 10 questions on each quiz. And the way that it works is each of those quizzes will cover the material from that class session that day, okay? And potentially any sort of reading and that sort of thing that you've been assigned. So like today, as an example, the Chapter 4 material on leases that we'll be covering in class, working through problems, that sort of thing. That's what's going to be tested on quiz number 1 at the end of today. And typically you're given about 30 minutes to do the quizzes, so about 3 minutes per question. The quizzes are open book, open notes, okay? So it encourages you to obviously take notes, pay attention, stay focused while we're going over the material that day in class, okay? Now, if for whatever reason you miss a quiz, or you miss a day in class, or you don't get the grade that you want on a particular quiz, what happens is at the end of the first 4 quizzes, you will have the option to take a midterm, okay? And the midterm will replace all 4 quiz grades, okay? Does that make sense? But the difference is the midterm is closed book with closed notes. So that means that you've got to study, obviously, make sure that you fully, completely possess the material, and then you're able to take the midterm. Now, if your grade on the midterm is lower than your quiz scores, you still get to keep basically your existing quiz scores, okay? But the midterm is optional, okay? And it's actually held outside of class. So in the event that you want to take the midterm or you need to take the midterm, what we will do is we will schedule it for the week after basically quiz number 4. Does that make sense? All right. Now, so each of the quizzes, in essence, if you kind of do the math, is 8 quizzes into basically 100% or whatever, about 12.5% per quiz. So you'll sort of think of that in terms of your sort of raw grade. So the same process for the first 4 quizzes applies to the last 4 quizzes, and then you would take a final exam covering those last 4 quizzes if you're not happy basically with your grades. Now, historically in the past, I would say probably less than 20% of the class take the midterm or take the final, okay? And usually of those 20% that take the midterm or take the final, their grade usually doesn't change that much, okay? It usually, it's kind of, it is what it is. The time that it does change is if you have missed a quiz, then you're replacing a 0 score, hopefully with a, better score overall. Does that make sense? Okay? So, but now does that mean that, let's just say, hypothetically, you get a 70% average on the first 4 quizzes, and then you take the midterm. Is it possible that you could get something higher than that or lower than that? Absolutely. I have had, there are always exceptions. But I've had people that'll take, all 4 quizzes, get an average of a 70, they'll come in, they'll take the midterm, they could get a 70, they could get an 80, they could potentially get 100. Okay, it's possible. There's nothing precluding anybody from doing that. It's just that chances are, if you performed at a 70% level on the quiz in the day of the class, you're probably going to perform pretty close to that on the midterm unless you really put the extra effort in and you really take the time to prepare yourself, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, any questions about that? So those are the only grades that you have in this course, are basically those quiz scores or basically a midterm and a final, all right? You good with that? Yes. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we've got a little bit of an abbreviated session. We'll see how time goes. If for whatever reason we aren't able to complete the material that I want to get through today because we have the guest speaker today, we may push that quiz into next week, okay? But usually I'm pretty good about measuring this, so I think we'll be okay. All right, so let's just sort of start off. One of the very first things from kind of a real estate investment perspective is, where's your money coming from, okay? And so that's kind of where we're starting here with leases, okay? Because that's the raw cash that's coming in the door, from your tenants. But how that money sort of comes to you and how much and how often and what it's based on and how much of it you get to keep and that sort of thing is all determined up front, obviously, with the lease that you engage with the tenant. Well, one of the fundamental things that you need to become, you need to understand is, first of all, when people talk about gross leases versus net leases, what are they talking about? Now, some of you, already, you're totally cool with this, you totally understand it. Others of you probably, have no clue, okay? So we're going to go with the no clue sort of perspective on this. So the difference between a gross lease and a net lease is who pays for what, okay? And what I mean by that, does the landlord pay or does the tenant pay? And what we're talking about here are predominantly expenses, okay? And when I'm talking about expenses, this would be things like property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, repairs, a whole number of different things is who is responsible for what, all right? In what I would term on one end of the spectrum, what I would call an absolute gross lease, okay? That is kind of the farthest end of the spectrum. That is as close as you're going to ever come to what I would call an all bills paid sort of experience, okay? And so from your perspective as the tenant, you simply write a check, whether it's every day, every month, every year, for a set dollar amount, and you don't have to worry about really any expenses associated with the operation of the property on an ongoing basis. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, under that circumstance, the tenant is, able to a certain extent predict, what their costs are gonna be, much better, because if they're just paying just sort of this flat lump sum every month, every year, then they can budget out, they kind of know, okay, well, this is what I'm responsible for, and so they're not gonna be, a lot of issues of them sort of wondering, well, how much is my electric bill gonna be next month? How much is my water bill gonna be? How much am I gonna have to pay for, other routine sort of expenses? All of it's gonna be included up front. That's on the most extreme case. On the other most extreme case is what I would call an absolute triple net lease, okay? And under this situation, it could not be more opposite, in the sense that here, the tenant is responsible for everything, okay? That, if a window gets busted out, the tenant's responsible. If the parking lot needs to be resurfaced, the tenant is responsible. If the roof needs to be replaced, the tenant is responsible. If anything happens, all expenses, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, everything is borne by the tenant, okay? Now, the kind of properties that tend to fall in that category are usually like the big box tenants, or those retail tenants like a CVS or a Walgreens, that sort of thing, where in essence, in many cases, they buy the property, they build their building, and then they end up selling off the building to some sort of third-party investor, but yet then lease it back from those folks for the next 30 years. But the deal that they make with those investors is, hey, we're just going to cut you a check for basically that lease payment, but we're going to be responsible as CVS or whoever to actually take care of the property on an ongoing basis. Does that make sense? All right? So everything else falls in between, okay, those two extremes, okay? And so, and each lease will then be negotiated as such. So, you have, a residential apartment lease. It's gonna fall, probably a little bit, kind of maybe, probably closer to the gross, because predominantly, like if you're paying an apartment lease, what are you paying out of your pocket as an expense? You're paying your what? Utilities.
Water, electric.
Yeah, your utilities, okay? But that's pretty much it, yes? For the most part, okay? The landlord is covering the property taxes, is covering the property insurance for the property as a whole. They're taking care of the maintenance and repairs and so forth, so on, okay? Whereas, even a more extreme example of a gross lease might be something like a dorm, okay? If you live in a dorm on a university campus, in most cases you pay a flat rate at the beginning of the year or beginning of the semester, and that covers all of your utilities, all the maintenance, everything, and so, you're really not responsible for virtually anything, okay? Now, as I said, on the absolute triple net, those are gonna be the folks like the big box tenants that typically are gonna be responsible for their own space, okay? And then everything else, as I said, kind of falls in the middle. Now, what you're gonna also find is that in some markets, you may have a situation of where a market is almost exclusively, more of a gross lease market or more of a net lease market for certain property types. And that may be driven just by history, okay? That you may have had a developer and a property owner that was one of the predominant players in that market that chose up front to say, hey, virtually all my properties, I'm gonna set them up as gross leases, and that's the way that I'm gonna own and manage them. And so from that point forward, many of the other folks decided to adopt the same strategy, and so that's why the market sort of set up that way. Other markets, just the opposite, okay? Now, is one inherently better than the other? It really just sort of depends on, to a certain extent, how predictable those expenses are, and whether or not you want to bear the burden as the property owner, or you want to shift that burden away from you to the tenant, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, question?
Just on the triple net, what are they really giving you? I mean, about tax and stuff like that, but that's still, they take care of that?
Once again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Some property owners, sort of like myself, I want mailbox money, okay? I want tenants writing me a check basically, every month, and I don't really have to think about things. They're taking care of the property taxes, they're taking care of the maintenance, they're taking care of all that. I'm never going to be called up in the middle of the night and say, hey, we need this, fixed. For the most part, they're taking care of that. Okay? Other folks, obviously like your guest speaker, he's okay with that. He doesn't, mind, dealing with all of that. And so, in that sense, he and I are very different. He is much more hands-on and wanting to be out there and dealing with tenants. I inherently don't like people. So, dealing with, those sorts of day-to-day issues, I'm not the guy. Okay? All right? Okay. Moving on. All right, so let's just sort of take a look. One of the things that you, as I said, you sort of start with in terms of this income, and I think it's really good for us to go through a simple little example, and we'll kind of explain this as we sort of go through. For those of you who haven't been before, you've sort of seen this before. That's okay, because this is where we begin to kind of delve into this in a lot more detail. Okay? So, whenever we start out with a property, we start out with potential gross income, PGI. Sometimes it's called gross potential income. I mean, every book, every handout, everything that you get may call it something slightly different. But basically what this boils down to, this is the maximum income the property can generate if fully occupied, okay? So let's just start off, we have a little case that we're gonna use, all right? This is gonna be a little apartment complex, all right? So let's just sort of, how many units? You tell me. 10 units, all right? And what's the rent rate per unit, per month? $1,000. Okay, $1,000 a month per unit. Oops. Okay, so this keeps things relatively simple. So that means that in a given month, we've got $10,000 a month, or $120,000 per year. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, so our potential gross income for this property over the course of a year would be $120,000. All right? Everybody still with me? Yes? No? Possibly could be. All right, moving forward. All right, the next line item that we've got is vacancy and collection losses. Okay, so vacancy and collection losses, vacancies are simply the property is not occupied, therefore you're not getting rent, whereas a collection loss is the property is occupied, but you've got a deadbeat tenant, they're not paying the rent, okay? And so you sometimes just want to make that distinction, but yet at the same time, we tend to lump it all together. So give me a vacancy and collection loss, either amount or a percentage.
10%.
Okay, 10%, all right. Thank you for keeping math simple for me. All right, 10% is this going to be $12,000, okay, per year. Okay, we're going to subtract out. All right, now other income is going to be stuff like billboards on the property, or parking fees, or laundry, or what's vending machines, and other just ancillary sort of income that's not really rental income, but is income the property generates. So give me a dollar amount for that.
10,000.
10,000.
Could there be like pet fees and stuff?
It could be pet fees. Those are typically refundable, but yet at the same time, it technically is income that you're receiving, okay? All right, so we've got 120,000, we subtract out the 12,000, and we add in the 10,000.
120.
118. Okay, all right. 118,000 is going to be what we're going to refer to as our EGI, or effective gross income. This is the real dollar amount that's coming in the door for this particular property that we sort of, in one sense, are kind of putting into a bank account. All right, from that, then we have operating expenses, and this is kind of what we were just talking about with the gross versus the net lease thing. This is kind of how this all sort of relates. If we were to have a gross lease, that means the landlord is paying all of the operating expenses, yes? That means that this number would be really large, okay? But if we had an absolute net lease, that means this number will be really small, if anything at all, okay, on the two extremes, okay? Now, and I'm not going to get into all of the accounting, nitpicky sort of details on this, but normally what you will do, just as kind of a matter of practice, is even if it is a net lease and the tenant is paying it, you may still write the check for many of those items, but then you are reimbursed. Okay, does that make sense? So it's kind of like, okay, my property taxes are $10,000 on this property. I, as the owner, landlord, write a check to the taxing authority for $10,000, and then I basically bill my tenant for that $10,000. Does that make sense? Okay, everybody cool with that? Okay. But in this case, we're just going to sort of say it's a percentage or a dollar amount of the EGI, so give me either a percentage or a dollar amount.
5,000.
How much?
5,000.
Oh goodness, we gotta have more operating expenses than that.
20%.
30%.
So let's just say,
50,000.
yeah, 30%.
50,000.
So 30% is gonna be 35,400. And that's gonna be 30% of EGI, okay? Now yes, we just did pull that number from the sky, okay? But for a lot of residential properties, 30-something% is pretty normal for what the normal arrangement's going to be of who's going to be paying for what and that sort of thing. All right, so we subtract that out. And that leaves us with net operating income of $82,600. Now the reason why this number is probably one of the most important numbers is this is the number that tends to indicate to people what is the cash flow after expenses the property is generating on an annual basis. And so this is the number, whenever you heard Chris talk real briefly about the cap rate, this is the number that typically feeds into that cap rate. Okay, let's explain that real quick. All right, the cap rate uses a simple little formula that I refer to as ERV, okay? And the way this works is your income, or net operating income up here, of $82,600 is your annual income. Then down here is your rate of return, or your cap rate. And over here is the value, or the market value, the investment value, whatever value that we're trying to represent. So now if we have our income and we want to establish what we think should be a value for the property, then we've got to figure out, well, what is the appropriate cap rate or rate of return this property type should throw off each year. Okay, one of the numbers that he sort of threw out there was what? About 7%. Okay, so if 7% is going to be our cap rate or our annual sort of rate of return, what you're going to do is you're going to take that 82,600 divided by 0.07 or 7%, and that's going to indicate a value for this property of $1,180,000. Okay, now this is the super simplified, very basic approach to coming up with the value for a property. All right, in the sense of the value of the property is being determined by these two variables. How much income is it generating on an annual basis after expenses? What is the rate of return or cap rate, the amount of return that we would have to offer in order to attract capital to the deal? And then, so this divided by this gives us this, okay? Now, let's just say the property is actually priced at on the market, it's on the market, and someone has it priced at $1 million. That's what their asking price is, okay? Well, if you go through and you were to say, all right, well, the income is $82,600, that's what we predicted it to be for, you know, this sort of point forward, and the amount that's being asked for the property is $1 million, then you would take 82,600 divided by, okay, this divided by this, divided by 1 million, will give you what the implied cap rate is. Okay, so in this case, 82,600 divided by 1 million is going to give us a cap rate of basically 8.26%, which, is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's a really good thing, because what that's basically saying is if the market cap rate that like Chris Murphy was sort of talking about is sitting at 7%, and you're saying you could pay as much as 11 or 1.1 million for the property, but if the property is currently priced at by the existing owner for 1 million, then that means you're going to be able to get a higher rate of return or a higher cap rate or a higher value for the property. Therefore, you're getting a good deal. Does that make sense? Now that's very basic, very simplistic, but it's meant to illustrate the concepts. Now what we tend to do in this class is we complicate everything, okay? We complicate how we go about getting this net operating income. We complicate how we go about establishing this cap rate. We complicate what kind of value it is that we're talking about. And we deal with, obviously, income taxes, okay? The big nasty that no one, really likes to talk about, but at the end of the day, how many times did he talk about income taxes today, about avoiding income taxes? Why does he, basically not take money out of many of the properties? To avoid capital gains. Why does he choose to put, basically everything back in the property? To avoid, basically, income taxes, okay? So a significant portion of this course is going to be about those sort of income tax implications. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Possibly could be. Okay. All right, moving forward. So, the point about this whole gross versus net leases as it relates to this income stream, 2 line items. Basically, how is that going to affect your PGI in terms of what rental rate is it that you're sort of throwing out there and you're charging folks? And then what are the operating expenses in terms of who's paying for them, how much are they paying for them, are they, how is that sort of set up and how is that structured? But ultimately, at the end of the day, the most important number is still going to be your net operating income. But here's the thing, and the ones of you that are really paying attention and you're really thinking about this, this number, this NOI number, can be fairly easily manipulated, okay? And what I mean by that is that you could have one property owner that basically sets up their leases to where, in essence, the tenants pay for everything, therefore they're not paying for a lot of things, and so they have what appear to be very low operating expenses, okay, which then could flow through and mean you have a higher net operating income. But then you would say, well, wait a second, if that's the case, if the tenant is paying more of the operating expenses, wouldn't that mean that their rent rate would be lower? It should be, okay? But it's a question of kind of how you go about recording it, how you go about structuring it, which we're going to get into a little bit later, okay? But right now, just simply understand where the PGI is coming from, where in terms of how this can be potentially manipulated by the type of lease that you have, and then ultimately your net operating income being the most important number to feed into the valuation of the property. Okay, make sense? Okay, nice warm fuzzy feelings all the way around? Okay, good. All right, now, so at this point, one of the things that we want to talk about are rent escalations. And then we also want to talk about percentage rent. Okay, so let's start off with rent escalations. Whenever you go to lease, let's say an apartment, most of the time, how long is your lease?
12 months.
12 months, 1 year, okay? There are probably a handful of exceptions of where property owners will obviously lease you for less time or lease you for more time, but the standard normal is going to be a 1 year lease on a residential property, okay? Commercial property, very different animal, okay? In the sense that most commercial properties, the shortest lease in most cases, is going to be around 3 years, okay? And you can get I'm not saying you can't get a 1-year lease on a commercial property. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the standard, sort of normal commercial lease is going to be probably 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and in some cases, 20 years, 25 years, you know, usually not too much longer than 25 years, but somewhere, you know, in that range. Now, what that means, though, is if you're going to lock in a lease for more than a year or so, you're probably going to want to have some sort of a provision that allows you to raise that rent over time. Does that make sense? Okay? But in other words, you're not just locking in at today's rate forever for the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it might be. You want to have some sort of provision in there. Now, it may be that you just have an automatic increase of, okay, every year it's going to go up by 2%, or every year it's going to go up by 3%, you know, some sort of a standard step up or escalation in the rent. But it also could be based on some sort of an external factor, like it could be based on, you know, once again, kind of certain market conditions, okay? It could be that every couple of years you've got to go out in the market and do a survey of similar properties and what are they leasing at on a per square foot basis, and then the rent gets adjusted to, in essence, that. You know, so there's a lot of different ways that step up or change in whatever, and it also could go down. I mean, very seldom does that happen unless you do have it tied to something that, an index that could obviously allow it to be lowered. But most of the time it is sort of a stair step, you know, upward, okay? So in terms of how that manifests itself, so if we've got a lease and we say that the base lease is $10 per square foot per year, and we've got, I don't know, 10,000 square feet of space, then what does that mean? In terms of our gross income, that is going to be what? $100,000 per year. This is not a monthly number, this is an annual number, okay? And this is one of the differences between residential versus commercial properties. With residential properties, we almost always quote the rent as a monthly rent, okay? Or a monthly rent per square foot. If you look at most apartment communities, especially the higher end apartment communities, they are constantly doing lease surveys and looking at what the lease amounts are on a per square foot per month basis. So it might be that you're paying, I don't know, $1.50 per month per square foot on a residential lease. But on commercial leases, the standard normal way of approaching is it's quoted on a per square foot per year, okay? Now, that does not mean that you can't have a small commercial property and they say the lease is, $2,000 a month or whatever. What we're saying is that in terms of the way in which we sort of normalize this is we typically refer to it as a per square foot per year, okay? We good with that? Make sense? Okay. Now, if we were to say the rent escalates by 2% a year, okay, for the first couple of years, what would we do? Okay, to keep the math really simple and not actually have to break out the financial calculator, if it goes up in year one is this, and we're saying in year two it goes up by 2%, what would the year two number be?
102.
Without having to do much math, yeah, it's going to be 102,000. Now, how do we get that? Is simply taking the 100,000, multiply it by 1.02, multiply it by itself plus the 2%, and that will give you the 102,000. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Now it gets a little bit more complex because of the math. Well, what about the following year? It goes up by another 2%. Here we can't just simply, tack on another $2,000 because we've got to obviously take into account the other $2,000. So in this case, let's see what we get for year three. So 102,000 times 1.02. So you end up with 104,040 as the rent for year 3. Okay? And so forth, so on. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes, no, possibly could be. Okay? Now, if we wanted to, we could then also say, well, what does that year 3 number translate into in a per square foot? Okay, well, you would simply take the 104,040 divided by the 10,000 square feet, and so what you're going to say is, now the new rent is really what?
$10.40.
$10 and basically, 40-ish cents per square foot per year. Does that make sense? Just simply taking this number divided by the 10,000 square feet. Okay? Make sense? Okay. Moving forward. Okay, percentage rent.
So that's the rent escalations, it's just saying that over 10-year period, if you sign this.
Whatever, yeah, it's going to increase by a certain percentage each year.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, so percentage rent. This is done almost exclusively on retail properties. This is where you want to accomplish a couple of different things. One is you want, as the property owner, to ensure that you are giving your rental tenants the best chance of success, but also benefiting from their success and giving you an incentive as the property owner to do a good job of maintaining the property and helping to bring customers to the tenants that occupy your space. Does that make sense? So the way percentage rent works is normally you're going to have a base rent for the property. And that base rent, once again, much like we maybe just previously described, might be $10 per square foot per year for the space. But the percentage rent is going to be tacked on top of that, okay? And it's usually going to be based on the sales that that tenant has for any given month, okay, or any given year, all right? Because if you think about, and this is sort of a traditional retailer. The traditional retailer, when historically the majority of their sales take place during the holiday season, okay, in terms of sales for goods that people are buying for Christmas and the holidays and that sort of thing. So their sales spike, but it's not always going to be the case. It could be also seasonal, based on weather. Could be seasonal, just based on whenever students are in session. If it's a college town, maybe their sales are really light in the summer, but really heavy, whenever the students come back in August and then really low after they leave in May or whatever. So the point is, though, from the property owner's perspective, is that you're trying to say, yes, I want some sort of a base level of income throughout the year, but in these sort of peak sales times during the year, I want to benefit as the property owner, and I want to get that other income. Now, one of the things that people tend to sort of throw out when we talk about this is, well, how do you keep the tenants honest? In terms of accurately giving you a percentage of whatever it is that they're generating in sales. And the only answer to that is, normally they're going to have sales tax receipts that they have to submit to the taxing authorities, and you're normally going to use that as the basis. They're going to simply turn over that report to you each month, and you kind of hope, if they're lying to the government, they've got a bigger problem than potentially lying to you. Okay. So from the standpoint of those sales tax receipts, that's usually going to be the foundation for calculating whatever the percentage rent is. Now, the way that it may happen in terms of this percentage rent is you may sort of say, all right, you're going to give me, as the property owner, 10% of your gross sales above $500,000. Okay? So that means what? If my sales are $450,000, how much am I going to pay in percentage rent? 0. Okay? Because you haven't met the threshold. Okay? But now if my sales are $600,000, what does that mean?
10% of 100,000, so you're paying.
Yep. So if the sales are actually 600,000, we've got to subtract out the sort of the base, in the sense of the 500, meaning that the overage is the 100,000, and then of that 100,000, I get 10%, or an extra $10,000. Does that make sense? Bless you. Yes? No, possibly could be. Okay, so in this case, once again, if we're dealing with a 10,000 square foot building, we're getting, in essence, 10 times 10, or $100,000 of base rent, plus we're going to get $10,000 of percentage rent, meaning a total of $110,000 of total rent. Does that make sense? Yes, no, possibly could be. Okay? Everybody comfortable with that concept? Yep.
Just like a background on that concept, when would it typically be used? When's like the best instance for it?
Well, no, it's always going to be used for retail tenants. That once again, you know, you've got a restaurant, or you've got a bar, or you've got a clothing store, or you know, whatever it is, and you want to basically not put too much of a burden on the tenant in their downtimes of the year.
Gotcha.
And then ultimately, whenever they are doing well, that you're going to do well.
Get it, I get it, yeah.
Okay?
So then usually, I'm assuming that the base rents are almost just covering your expenses, and then the percentage rent is what's kind of your profit margins.
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, and once again, there's so many different ways to structure this. All I'm really trying to equip you with is the base concept of, you need to be aware of this. You need to understand that if you own retail property, one of the things that you can do to potentially try to get some extra income out of the folks is to charge them some sort of a percent. Now, in some cases, you may go the full extreme, and you may just simply say, I'm not going to charge you any base rent. I'm going to charge you all percentage rent. Okay? And I know Cole knows of an example of a property owner in Fort Lauderdale that does just that for a restaurant they own. You want to tell that real quick?
Oh yeah, so Casablanca down in Fort Lauderdale, I'm pretty sure the owner's actually Halmos, and he charges, I think, 7% of total revenue of the restaurant, and of course that restaurant is one of the top restaurants in Fort Lauderdale, right on the beach, so he probably does pretty well on that.
Yeah, so that's, you know, just one example of how you put this into practice. You say, as a property owner, instead of me sort of trying to figure out from year to year, month to month, what the appropriate rate of rent I should be charging you is, I'm just going to simply say, 7% of your gross sales, done. You know, and then, you know, so each month, depending on if they do well, he gets paid a lot more money. If they don't do so well, doesn't get paid as much money. And then, you know, at the end of the lease, if it, you know, hasn't worked out, I'm sure that they can, you know, figure out a way to potentially renegotiate. Yeah, Kenny.
Isn't the rental rate on a percentage rent below market value as well too?
Not necessarily. I mean,
you can hit them with market.
Well, I mean, it really, in this particular instance, it's based upon their success. I mean, yes, it's going to be below market in the sense that maybe this base rent may be lower than a normal rent without base rent, but it also could very well be just the opportunity for, if the property owner is willing to accept the swings of the market over the year, they may actually come out much more ahead. Like, I guess what I'm saying is, here, the effective rent is really $11 a square foot. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay? So, if the effective rent is $11 a square foot, and in the market is actually $10.50. Okay, for no percentage rent. Just a regular sort of base rent, no percentage rent is $10.50. then the tenant, has got to say, well, this guy's offering me 10, but I've got to pay him a little bit of extra. If I do well, I'm okay with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. What I was gonna say is that in the book, it also referenced in the percentage rent that part of the incentive for the tenant is that it's a co-partnership.
Yeah,
where
that's exactly what I said. Yeah, it is, in the sense that it incentivizes, the landlord to do a good job of maintaining the property, promoting the property, getting customers to the property. But like, for example, if I were homeless and I owned, obviously that restaurant, what do you think I'm gonna do on a day-to-day basis? I'm gonna tell everybody I know, go to that restaurant, because ultimately it's gonna impact me.
What I was getting at is that if it's below rent and then you're having to do all these added extra stuff to actually improve the property, make it marketable, don't you have increased costs as well?
You may, but see, this also gets to the point of, and once again, we can delve into the weeds on this, but we don't really need to, but the point is, it's a question of what kind of landlord you want to be at the end of the day. Do you want to be the kind of landlord that is kind of the slumlord landlord that basically puts no money, no resources into the property, and then just tries to suck the property dry for every dollar they can get? Or, on the total opposite end of the spectrum, be the landlord that puts every possible dollar they possibly can into that property, making that property absolutely, a showplace for the market. Normally, most landlords fall somewhere in the middle, okay, of, trying to say, okay, what do I need to do to, what are the most effective dollars that I can spend to get my tenants to be that much more successful, without going crazy.
For Casablanca, it would be opportunistic for him to do percentage, right? Because that restaurant probably does millions of dollars a year. As opposed to like, base rent and making, a couple $100,000, he probably does way better.
I'm just
Let me interrupt you. Thought just hit me. Think about it like this. How many times have you seen areas, let's just sort of take something like, what's the one in Miami, Wynwood, okay? Wynwood for many years was what? Artist, yes? Still kind of sort of is, but it's stepped up, in terms of the quality and whatnot. And also the sort of tenants that were there in terms of the retail tenants kind of went from this quality sort of to this quality. Would all of you tend to agree with that? Okay, now, here's the thing. In many instances, because I've been a part of this kind of renovation sort of cycle in neighborhoods and understand it pretty well, in the sense that some of the first investors, they come into a neighborhood like that, they buy the properties for next to nothing. I mean, bargain basement prices well below replacement cost, okay? Then they have a vision of, okay, let's create this into something interesting, cool, fun, whatever. And then they, go and get these tenants, in many cases, that really can't afford to pay a lot of rent, but can make the place kind of cool. And artists are usually the ones that get pegged, first. They bring them in, they kind of do their thing, get the area, that cool, hip vibe, whatever. Then, ultimately, what happens is, you're getting all this foot traffic. Well, then that starts to attract some of these other sort of, retail vendors and so forth. And then what begins to happen is those original owners of the property say, market values have gone up. Okay, what do I do now? Well, in many cases, they may say, instead of holding on to those properties, like our guest speaker, many of them say, I'm gonna take the quick hit, I'm gonna cash out, okay? Well, they bought down here, they cash out up here. Well, what does that do? That resets, to a certain extent, the rental rate that probably is going to have to be charged in order for that new owner to get the rate of return that they're willing to accept. Does that make sense? Well, then what begins to happen is they start raising the rents. So a lot of those original tenants that didn't make a lot of money end up getting booted out and replaced with, obviously, a higher end quality tenant that then can afford, sort of that new price point. And then that cycle kind of tends to, continually perpetuate to the point of where, in many cases, then even those tenants get priced out because it becomes unsustainable because everybody gets greedy, okay? Versus the model sort of employed here is, we all grow together, we're all happy together with the percentage rent, because there, you're just paying a percent of whatever gross receipts you're getting. So if your business is doing great, yeah, you're paying more. Well, you deserve to pay more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, what it fundamentally sort of comes down to is that, yeah, you are entering sort of a partnership with the tenant and the property owner, that their success is your success and your success is their success.
But would you agree is also a critical factor of management costs?
In what way?
In a sense of expense management, like if you have to make certain number of expenses or...
Well, okay, if we're doing the kind of deal that Cole and I are talking about, I, as the property owner, am going to be incentivized to do everything that I can reasonably to maintain that property, because if I don't, my tenant's not going to be successful and I'm not going to get as much money. You know?
And it's percentage of gross. It's
Right.
a percentage, like if your expenses are super high, you're still getting it off of the gross.
Okay.
Not the NOI.
Okay, all right, moving on. Anybody else on that one? Okay, moving forward. Okay, let's see, next topic, what do I got here? Okay, let's talk a little bit about common area maintenance stuff. CAMs. All right, one of the things that you will face in a lot of commercial properties is the dreaded CAM charges. And for first-time tenants in commercial spaces, this is one of the things that usually freaks them out. And for good reason. Because what they see and what happens with most, entering sort of tenants is they're looking at what? What is that rent rate? And what is that rent rate either per month or per year for the square footage that I'm going to be acquiring? What in many cases they don't look at very closely are the CAM charges, okay? Common area maintenance charges. Now, what this is in essence where the property owner is basically saying on a monthly basis or on an annual basis, I am going to pass through to you a whole variety of expenses associated with the property. So in other words, you may be paying this net lease, but then on top of that net lease, okay, here's where some of that expense reimbursement begins to sort of take place in terms of these CAM charges. Now, normally the CAM charges are going to be assessed based upon your square footage proportionment within the property. So in other words, if you've got 5 tenants, each of you have equal space within the property. Each of you are going to pay your equal, 20% share of the total common area maintenance charges. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. And as I said, many of these are going to be assessed. So you're saying, well, what are some examples of the common area maintenance charges? These are going to be the things like, once again, if we have to go in and we have to do some replacement of light fixtures on the exterior of the property, probably going to come out of the common area maintenance charges. If we've got to go in and resurface the parking lot, probably going to come out of the common area maintenance charges. Security, other, ancillary things, associated with the day-to-day operation of the property. And the thing is, these aren't always going to be fixed. In other words, you as the tenant aren't necessarily going to know what the dollar amount is that you're going to be charged each month for those CAM charges. Depending on your lease, these could vary from month to month, year to year. So if you have a really aggressive property manager that's going in constantly spending money and then ultimately, boom, you've got to pay these CAM charges, you could be paying a lot of extra cash out of pocket. Does that make sense? Okay. Now in terms, let's see if I can come up with a quick little example or problem for that.
Nothing structural?
I'm sorry?
Nothing structural?
Not usually. I mean, most of the time it's just going to be things that are done to maintain, to deal with the general wear and tear on the property and maintaining it to a occupiable level.
Lobby?
Sure. All right.
But cleaning also?
It could also be cleaning. Okay, cleaning charges. You can throw a lot of stuff in the common area maintenance charges.
Like gardening?
Whatever you choose to put in there, literally. Okay, but this is why up front that lease is so important. because, as I said, I've known a lot of different tenants that have come into properties and they think, whoa, I'm getting a great lease rate, you know, compared to everybody else in town. And then all of a sudden, they get their first couple of CAM charges and they're like, holy moly, what the heck happened here? You know, in terms of why am I being charged all these extra expenses? Did I agree to that? Yeah, I did. Oh, you know, and you're screwed.
Is there a cap on that? Because like
There can be.
Is that has to, like that? It would behoove the landlord to just rent the property and then fix it once it's filled, and then defer the charges to the tenants.
To a certain extent, it's almost what happens in a lot of cases.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, you know, it's really almost criminal in some cases what will happen with some of these
Yeah,
charges.
I can only see that's a slippery slope right there.
Yeah. Okay. So in this case, let's just say kind of like what we were talking about. So give me like a total dollar amount for CAM charges for the course of a year.
I have no idea.
50,000.
Okay, 50,000. All right, so if we have $50,000 of annual CAM charges, all right, and in this case, let's say that the other tenants are, or let's say that maybe in this particular property we've got an anchor tenant. It'd be like a shopping center or like a grocery store or something like that, and maybe they're paying, let's say, $20,000 by the anchor CAM charges, leaving $30,000 for the inline tenants in this retail property. Inline tenants simply mean, you think about a typical shopping center that has like a grocery store as an anchor. You know, the standard normal design is, you know, something like this. You know, it's kind of like, you got the anchor here in the middle, and then you've got the inline tenants, you know, oops, you know, over here. Make sense? Okay, so a parking lot out here. Okay, so in this case, the CAM charges for the property as a whole, $50,000. The anchor is paying $20,000 of those, and then the remainder is being paid by the inline tenants. Okay, now in this case, let's say that the inline tenants, we've got 4 of those. So divided by 4. So each one of those inline tenants would be paying $7,500 for their CAM charges. Okay, make sense?
A year.
Or a year. Okay, questions? Okay.
So just basically it's the outside of it, just a common.
Yeah.
Just a common.
Common area maintenance, that's what it's called. CAM charges.
So I'd just like to go into that, like some examples of it again would be
Okay, like we said, resurfacing the parking lot, replacing light fixtures, replacing light bulbs, doing any sort of like landscaping, you know, upkeep and maintenance.
AC upkeep.
Anything that's going to pretty much keep the property in normal working order, but it's a shared expense because it's not tied to a specific unit. In other words, it's impossible to split up the resurfacing of a parking lot and say, you know, in essence, if you're over here, you're going to pay for this portion of it to be resurfaced. That's why we've got to sort of say the total cost is whatever it is, and then you're going to pay for your proportional amount of that.
And in this case, each tenant would have the same square footage.
Yeah, in this particular instance. Okay, but if we gave you an example of where they have different square footage, and you just do the math. Yep.
Well, when it comes to the variable portion of those that they can come out, would that be the same, just divided by the square footage?
I'm sorry, the variable portion?
Yeah, when I said like if it is an unknown expense, so I said for
Right.
example the AC, broke down and everybody has to obviously chip into it.
Right.
So would that be divided into the square footage of each tenant?
Depending on how the air conditioning is handled. Like, for example, I've owned properties of where, in a commercial setting, of where maybe 2 tenants share 1 AC unit. But it could also be that, you know, for the way this one's set up, that maybe we've got 4 tenants, 2 over here, 2 over here, that maybe, you know, once again, each of them share AC unit, so if this one breaks, maybe you only charge the ones over here. But it really depends. That's not to say That's not to say that you couldn't just simply say, look, stuff happens across the property, and even though this is really affecting these guys the most, we're still going to spread the cost over everybody. Because what happens whenever next month and this AC unit goes out, then, you know, do we once again just want to allocate it to those people, or do we want to allocate it to the property as a whole?
It doesn't affect rents though, right? You're not going to have like a lot of deferred maintenance and then lower rents for the leases so that they can pay CAM charges? Is that a thing?
Well, okay, that's, okay, the enticement, if a tenant is super savvy, they know what they're doing, which is not always the case, especially for inline tenants, because many of the inline tenants may very well be mom and pop kind of tenants, depending on, you know, the location, so they're not super savvy as to what they're getting themselves into. But you know, if they're a national tenant or a regional tenant that has multiple locations, they've been to this rodeo before, so, you know, they understand that there's a good chance that, yeah, they're going to get hammered with these, and as a result of that, yes, they should have a much lower, you know, sort of base rent, knowing they're going to probably have to cover many of these CAM charges.
It makes it so appealing to own retail, because then like you're just deferring all your improvements to your tenants.
What does it include?
I'm sorry?
Or you can say what actually can be included in CAM charges.
Yeah, no, it's all going to be stated up front in the lease as to what's going to be included, you know, potentially what's not included, and that sort of thing. All I'm trying to convey to you, the lesson, if you will, is be aware of CAM charges, especially whenever you're dealing with retail property and to some extent office properties in multi-tenanted buildings, because you also have them there, okay? All right, moving forward. Other questions before we move on? Okay. All right. We doing okay? We need a 5-minute break, or you good? You're good, okay, just making sure. All right. Let's see. All right, tenant improvements, TIs. So one of the things that can be negotiated up front on a commercial lease is tenant finish out, tenant improvements, you know, to make the space tenant ready. And who pays for that? And how does it get paid? When does it get paid? How much gets paid? You know, and what is it determined by? So let's just say that, you know, I'm the owner of a retail strip, and I've got these little inline tenants like these were described. And so I have a tenant that, or prospective tenant that wants to occupy the space. Let's, for simplicity, one of the worst in the world that I hate dealing with are salons, specifically hair salons. And the reason is because invariably they want you to put in all of these individual stations with all of this extra plumbing for, you know, basically being able to obviously shampoo the hair, rinse the hair, do all this other sort of stuff, and you know, maybe have 10 stations in a retail space. Well, that's a lot of extra plumbing. Now the question is, do I, as the property owner, want to incur that cost of putting in, you know, all of that extra plumbing and all of those sort of fixtures? Because to a certain extent, those are permanent fixtures. And permanent in the sense that the tenant's not going to be able to like, you know, very easily remove those whenever they move out of the space. It's going to be a fairly significant demolition process to remove those. And it's also the kind of improvement that is obviously very tenant specific. You know, that pretty much if I went and I paid for that and that salon goes out of business in, you know, 6 months or a year or whatever it might be, then, you know, if I go to release the space, I'm going to be pretty much stuck with getting another salon tenant unless I want to spend the money to obviously remove all of that, retrofit the space, and sort of move on about my business. So this is where you get into this kind of philosophy as a property owner as to what kind of tenants that you welcome and what kind of tenants that you tend to sort of say, not so much. And, you know, I tend to be the kind of property owner that's like, you know, I would much rather you pay for whatever it is that you want to put into the property, and you could potentially take it with you when you leave, but if you don't, I get to keep it, okay? And that way that I don't inherently get stuck with a bunch of upfront cost of having to put in, you you know, these sorts of things, and it gives them skin in the game with respect to they've made an investment in this property. Chances are, if they put in their own sort of fixtures that are somewhat permanent, they're probably not going to walk away after 6 months or a year because of that sunk cost. Does that make sense? But having said that, what if you were in a market though where it's basically a tenant market in the sense that there is a glut of space and every property owner is chasing after every possible tenant to try to get them into their space? One of the ways that you make your space more attractive than the other space is to do what? Make those tenant improvements, make the space, you know, attractive financially for that tenant. Now, that doesn't mean that you are not going to still try to get a longer term lease and so forth so that you can recoup those costs, but it's something that you need to be, you know, kind of aware of. Okay? Make sense? Okay, now in terms of, excuse me, sort of kind of a problem or an example maybe associated with that, what about, in this case, all right, how long of a lease do we want?
5 years.
5 years. All right, and in this case, how much is the rental rate per square foot per year?
1050, 5,000.
How much?
1050.
Make it a nice round number.
1075.
$10 square foot per year, okay? And how many square feet?
5,000.
5,000. All right, so let's just sort of start this off. In this case, 5,000 square feet times $10 per square foot per year, that would be 50,000 basically per year times 5 years, or 250,000 total. Okay, does that make sense?
They're got to take this in now.
Yep, pop it right there.
Awesome.
If any of you guys want a bagel, grab a bagel.
Sure.
We'll take a 2-minute break.
You can't have any.
You want a bagel? Whoa!
And then I'm going to come back down and they'll probably grab this. So I would say take this now, and then the catering people are going to come grab this.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thanks. All right. Quick 2-minute break. Grab a bagel if you want it. If you don't.
Car break.
And chances are there's going to be leftover lunch upstairs as well, so you'll get fed today if you're
You're really hungry.
We've got another event going on that has food associated with it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to own my first one next month. No, it's actually single family house, and I'm getting into it through creative financing. So basically, I'm only paying like $6,000.
Okay, come on, let's go. Hustle.
Nah, yeah,
I'm in break.
So like, she's a retired landlord, and it's her investment property that makes like
Okay, 60 seconds.
actually $758 a month exactly, and she doesn't really have any equity in it. She just wants to walk away. So she was like, if you give me $6,000, then you can. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I mean, because I have the contract and everything. It's just a process that goes on.
Okay. 30 seconds.
Hopefully I can do it. Well, I mean, I'm basically stepping into it. I don't have equity or that much. But yeah, it's like I make my money back in less than a year. Indulge.
Okay, so in the case of tenant improvements, we've got this total amount of income coming in on this property of $50,000 a year, $250,000 total, and maybe we want to do, I don't know, $20,000 worth of tenant improvements, okay? So in this case, what we could do to keep it simple is simply say out of that first year, we're going to subtract out $20,000 of tenant improvements, and then that's going to give us sort of effective rent of $30,000 for that first year. So in one sense, you know, depending on kind of how you want to kind of ask the question or whatever, you could just simply say something as simple as, if we have 10 improvements of $20,000 in that first year, what would be the total amount of rental income that you would generate over that first year? We could also sort of say, all right, what would be, in essence, your effective rent per square foot as a result of this? So if you do the math backwards into that, what do you get? In other words, per square foot per year. You're basically going to do what? You're going to take the 30,000
Divided by the
5,000. So what this really converts you from is $10 per square foot that first year to $6 per square foot for the first year. Does that make sense? Yes?
Can you repeat it?
Okay, one more time. Your rent is $10 a square foot times 5,000 square feet or $50,000 of rent. But after subtracting out your tenant improvements of 20,000, that leaves you with 30,000 of actual income. So 30,000 of actual income divided by the 5,000 square feet, okay, is $6 per square foot is what your effective rent would be during that first year. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. You could also, depending on, once again, what it is that you're trying to search for. Because you could also say, well, it's not so much just the first year that I'm really concerned about, it's over the life of this particular lease. So in one sense, we could just simply say, okay, we subtract out from the total, the 20, which would leave us with 230. And then what would we do? Divide that by 5 years. 230,000 divided by 5 years, which would give us 46,000 effective per year, divided by the 5,000 square feet, or $9.20. And you're saying, well, why would we do that? Well, that in essence is saying sort of over the life of this lease, if I could get a tenant, let's just put it this way, very simply put, if I could get a tenant that's willing to pay me $9.20 per square foot per year for the next 5 years, and I don't have to do any tenant finish out whatsoever, that is equivalent to the tenant that's paying me $10 per square foot, but I'm having to do $20,000 worth of finish out. Does that make sense? You're just trying to do kind of a cross comparison analysis between the two on a very basic level. Okay? Because most property owners, they're going to do some variation of this because they're saying, okay, I've got them there for 5 years. What does that really equate to in terms of changing up what my rental income really is on a per square foot basis per year? Okay? All right. Moving forward. Okay. Rent abatement or free rent. Okay? Same general sort of effect on the property owner in that it's reducing their income, but from the tenant's perspective, it may help a tenant get started in a space. And so on occasion in the past when I've had certain commercial tenants, one of the things that they will sort of hit me up for and say, hey, I've got to do a bunch of tenant improvements on the property. And I'd say, fine, do your tenant improvements, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you free rent for maybe the first month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it might be, saying in my mind that if I give them like 1 month or 2 months for free rent, chances are, what's the likelihood I'm going to have another tenant coming along that's going to rent the space within that time period? Because this is one of the things about commercial space that's also a little bit different than residential. With residential, it's almost just, I mean, if you've got a decent property in a decent location, you can, like he was talking about, you can pretty much have a tenant within a week. You know, you put a property up for lease, boom, lease executed, done, in. Commercial property, not so much, because you gotta have a business searching for a location. You know, out there somewhere floating in the universe, that they're, you know, searching for a location, and then they've gotta be made aware of the space that you have available within the neighborhood that you have. So there's a bit more of a disconnect there. And what I mean by that is that if a tenant or a space goes dark, and in terms of a tenant leaves, getting that space released is sometimes not as easy as it is on the residential side. So if you've got a situation of where you have a tenant in hand and all they're asking for is, yeah, give me a little bit of upfront money or give me free rent for a couple of months, 9 times out of 10, you'll probably say, sure, why not? If, once again, credit score, you know, and kind of background of the tenant seems reasonable enough to be able to sort of trust them with that, because what you don't want to have happen is, okay, yeah, you give them 1 or 2 months free rent, and then 3 or 4 months into the lease, then all of a sudden they bail, and, you know, not a good thing, okay? But in the event that you do offer the free rent, so let's just say, okay, we've got a property, okay, give me the square footage.
1,200 square feet.
Oh, small town. 1,200 square feet, okay. And what is the rent rate per square foot per year?
10.
10. Everybody likes 10 today. Okay, $10 per square foot per year. Okay. Very small space. What do I do with my calculators? Make sure I don't screw up anything, as I'm prone to do.
So we usually do this on like a residential, you know.
All right, so this one, 1,200 square feet times $10 a square foot. So that's only going to be $12,000 a year. Okay, for this, no, this is, okay, this is per square foot per year. So $12,000 for the year. So this is a very small tenant, very small commercial space, but that's okay. That's what Judson wants. All right, now, so let's just say, and this is on a per year basis, so that means we need to divide that by 12, which gives us, in this case, it's going to be $1,000 per month. Yes? So, how many months free rent do we want to give them?
3 months.
3. Okay? So, times 3, $3,000 free rent. Okay? So what does that mean now that we're actually getting in terms of rent for the year?
We only get
9,000. Exactly. So how many square feet do we have? We have 1,200. So 9,000 divided by 1,200 square feet. Basically, our effective rent is now $7.50 per square foot per year. Does that make sense? So that's the effect of the free rent on our rental rate. Okay, is everybody cool with that?
Yeah.
Yep. So it's not that dissimilar than the tenant improvements, except in this case, you're not actually paying the money, you know, in the sense of the property owner to you know, to have the improvements done. Here, you're just basically putting the burden on the tenant and saying, hey, I'm willing to forego the first 3 months in rent. You do whatever you need to do to get the space ready for yourself, and the sooner you can move in, the sooner you take occupancy, and ultimately, and this is also kind of another little interesting point. And I've done it sort of both ways. And I prefer to do it, okay, we sign the lease today, the clock starts. Because what you don't want to do is have the clock start whenever they finish the renovations. Okay? So, you know, if you start the clock now, because in other words, let's just say they take 2 months to do the renovations, they're in essence getting 5 months of rent for free. Okay? So, most of the time you want to start the clock immediately and to say, look, you've got 3 months of free rent to do whatever you need to do, get the space ready as quickly as you can because the clock starts now, and hopefully you've got it ready within that first 3 months to open and start making money. Okay? Yep, question?
Well, I was gonna ask, would you ever do a combination of both rent abatement and percentage?
You can do anything. I mean, and I mean that, sincerely. I mean, you can mix and match this stuff. I mean, it's kind of like it's a smorgasbord of items out there on the buffet for you to choose from. It's just a matter of what you want to pick and choose to sort of populate your lease. Yep.
Does it really depend on the landlord or the property owner, or does it have to do with any market circumstances? I mean, why
It can be both. I mean, once again, okay, if I'm understanding your question, is the reason we're giving the free rent because the market is a bad market and we're trying to get a tenant to the space? Yes, that could be a reason. It could also just simply be the reason that we just happen to want to get the tenant in there now and get somebody occupying the space, not really wanting to take a chance on how strong the market or weak the market may be. Okay? Yep.
Maybe it's a great customer, like a really, like a potentially good tenant that you really would like to be in your property.
And that could be the case as well, that maybe there's a new startup business, you really believe in it, as the property owner, you think it's a great idea, so you're saying, hey, we'll make the space available for you in terms of free rent for the first couple of months or a few months, and then after that, run your own. Okay.
Is there any scenario where in the office market where they'll tell you how much they just spend by moving into your space and just kind of leaving their current situation? Because that's costly, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're an office building tenant that you don't own the building, you're tenanted there, you've been there for several years, you've spent a lot of money putting in all of the different furniture and fixtures and lighting and signage and all that other sort of stuff. The property owner knows that. And the property owner knows there's a pretty high likelihood that you're going to probably renew the lease unless you, as a property owner, decide that you're going to charge them an outrageous increase whenever their lease comes, for renewal. But that's also why that in many cases, the more sophisticated tenants will ensure that whatever that lease renewal is, it's going to be predicated on something that may be completely market driven and not just some sort of arbitrary, capricious, kind of thought by the property owner that I'm going to get them, in 5 years or whatever. And yeah, I'm giving them cheap rent now for these first 5 years, but I know I've got them, 5 years from now, and I'm going to sock it to them in 5 years. So, okay, moving forward. Okay, let's talk about capital cost. Or in this case, sort of CapEx, which capital expenditures. One of the things that you're faced with as a property owner is dealing with when do I replace stuff, okay, in terms of what we typically refer to as capital expenditures. And by replacement, I mean things like, okay, air conditioning systems. Now, most of you just were saying, will you replace it whenever it breaks? Well, yes, maybe no. It sort of depends on, how expensive is it to replace, how old is the unit, is it energy efficient, is it this, is it that, and also to what extent you've budgeted for a replacement versus a repair. One of the things that we talked a little bit about in the real estate finance class is that sometimes whenever you get a loan, a commercial loan on a property, one of the provisions that the lender may put into place is what is called a reserve for replacement. And what that means is the lender is basically saying, I know stuff's going to break, okay? And I don't trust you, in essence, as the borrower on this loan, to be keeping a savings account on your own to make those sort of replacements. So I'm going to force you, as a matter of practice, and every lender's different, but I'm going to force you as a matter of practice to basically set aside a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage of your income each month, each year in an account that's called a reserve for replacements, so that if and when the air conditioning unit all of a sudden blows up, or the hot water heater blows up, or the roof has to be replaced or significantly repaired, or whatever that happens, parking lot has to be resurfaced, that you're not having to go back to the lender and say, hey, lend me more money, I need to do repairs. Because the lender is saying, I don't want to lend you any more money. I would rather you basically do a good job of kind of, keeping reserves so that you're constantly not having to come back to me, borrowing money. All right, does that make sense? Now, you may also sort of say, well, doesn't the lender want to, earn more interest off of making you more loans on the property? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, maybe yes. Okay, yes, that's additional, interest income for them, but maybe no, because that could be additional risk that they're incurring as a lender. That what happens if they keep making you loans for all these little nitpicky improvements and capital expenditures, that at some point you've taken out so much debt on the property you can't service the loan. You following? Okay. All right. So let's give a quick little example here. A little problem type. So in this case, let's say that we've got a property and it has an effective gross income, and give me a dollar amount for that effective gross income.
150,000.
I like 150,000. That's a little bit of a larger number. What is it with you and Judson, like these tiny little properties of just next to nothing in terms of dollars? Think big. Okay. All right. So we've got EGI 150, and let's say that we've got operating expenses off of that of how much? Just normal operating expenses. Just give me a number.
30%.
30%.
Now you're going to make me do calculations.
45,000.
Never ever trust yourself with math whenever you're teaching a class. That's all I can say. Okay, 150,000. You said what? 30% or 40%?
30%.
Okay, 30% of EGI. So 150 would be 45,000.
10% times 3.
Okay, now, in addition to that, we're going to have a capital expenditure allowance that's going to impact our net operating income. So this is, in other words, a new line item that we're inserting there. And so our CapEx expense might be, I don't know, let's just say 30,000, pulling that out of the air. All right? So in this case, what does that do to our NOI? So 150 minus 45,000 minus 30,000 gives us 75,000 as a revised NOI. Now this is where it gets to be interesting and kind of debatable as to how we treat this. If we're looking at this purely as a cash flow, okay, not for tax purposes, but just strictly for cash flow purposes, this is real money. Yes? This is real money. This is real money, but for tax treatment, it may be treated different than this, in the sense that we may have to amortize it or allocate it over several years, depending on what the tax code says about this particular item. It may have like a 5-year life, 10-year life, that sort of thing. But from a cash flow perspective, we do go ahead and subtract it out, and that will impact that year's net operating income. But the point being is, sort of once we've, and that's going to lower our net operating income by $30,000, and that is significant, but it's also going to be something that you would want to make sure that that is fully disclosed whenever you're going to buy a property. Here's one of the biggest problems that you face whenever you are investing in properties, is being able to properly upfront estimate what your cost of renovation or replacement or whatever else it is, other than, obviously, Chris was talking about this morning, you're going, with residential properties for the most part, if you do a good job on your inspections, you can pretty much identify what's wrong, what's not wrong, and hopefully not run into too many, crazy, unforeseen, circumstances that are gonna, put you in the toilet really quick in terms of your cash flow because you underestimated it. But with commercial properties, things can be that much more complicated, in terms of things that you may have to do to bring the property up to a commercial standard that is very different than a residential standard. And what I mean by that is usually with commercial properties where you are open to the public, there are a whole number of health and safety things that all of a sudden begin to pop up out of the woodwork, specifically as it deals with like sprinkler systems, okay? You know, for fire suppression. You know, also, you know, things to do with, in some cases, the type of wiring that you have in the wall. That, like, for example, with residential construction, you know, in most instances, it is not hard to get overly, you know, specific or technical, but you can, you know, put in flexible sort of, you know, Romex wiring into the walls, and it's very cheap and effective to do so, and almost anybody can do it. Requires very little skill to run basically electrical in a residential property. Commercial property, on the other hand, in most instances, all of that electrical has to be done inside a metal conduit, okay? And that metal conduit usually takes somebody that has a fair amount of skill to be able to run that conduit, not just your average ordinary handyman that's gonna, you know, basically be, you know, running the conduit. Well, my point with that is that if you try to convert maybe a residential property into a commercial property, you may be required to go in and completely retrofit that residential property that may have that kind of wiring in the wall to a commercial type of wiring. A simple thing that could cost you thousands upon thousands of dollars to do so, okay? My point, just to make sure that I'm being clear here, is that you need to do a good job, and obviously that's, you know, one of the things that Chris, you know, talked about, on the front end in terms of your due diligence, of trying to understand, you know, what are the things that you're potentially going to have to do to a property in order to make it occupiable so that you're hopefully going to be solvent once the property opens. Seems like a very common sense thing, but it's the area where I think most people get into trouble, okay? All right, everybody good with that? Make sense? Yay. All right, moving forward.
It's not necessarily like refreshing an elevator cap or anything like that, right?
It could be. I mean, it's basically, and we're going to get into this in a later discussion. When does something classified as a capital expenditure? When is it classified as repair and maintenance? Normally, it's classified as a capital expenditure if it's a full-on replacement of something. A repair and maintenance is normally what has to be done to maintain whatever it is in good working order. And they get treated differently for tax purposes. They're still both cash expenditures, but for tax purposes, the capital expenditure typically has to be amortized over a certain period of time relative to what that particular asset's effective tax life is.
It's like a hotel that refresh the rooms every 5-10 years.
That could be considered to be a capital expenditure, if they choose to do so. And we're going to talk about that in more detail later, trust me. I love that stuff, because there's real opportunity there. Okay. Okay, we're getting there. Coming down the stretch, running the wire. Okay, now, let's say we've got a property and we've got a 5-year lease, and we're trying to figure out basically what the rent is, net effective rent. All right? Now, let's say in year one, let's say 3 years or 5 years? 3, okay, keep it simple. 3 years. Okay, so the rent rate, give me the rent rate per square foot per year.
Per foot?
Yes.
Year one.
25. $25 per square foot per year. Okay? Year two, what is it going to change to? Give me a number.
27.
27. And year three.
39.
30 what?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a big
Okay. We'll go with it.
The neighborhood got on fire.
You're definitely squeezing him on the rent there. Okay. All right. All right. So the first piece of this question. Give me the average. That was simple. I think everybody can calculate an average. Yes. This plus this divided by 3.
30.3 divided by 3 is 27.
30.3.
25 plus 27 plus 39. 91. Yes? Is the total.
Yeah. 30.3.
Divided by 3 $30.33. Okay? We good with that? That's the first piece of the calculation. So if you can do that, you know that you've got basically one part of the question correct. All right? Good. All right. Next part of this question. Calculate the present value of this rent using a 10% discount rate. Okay, this is where we're going to use the financial calculator real quick. All right? So this is, those of you, everybody have a financial calculator? If you don't, I've got a couple of extras. Who needs one?
Did you want the net present value?
What's the question again? Calculate the?
I'm going to hold, just give me a second. Can you catch it? Okay. All right, so what we want you to calculate here is basically the present value of the rent using a 10% discount rate, and we'll explain that. All right, so here's what we're basically saying. In this particular example, you're in essence getting $25 here. You know, for the next year you're getting 27, the next year you're getting 39. Now, when we've done the average, we've come up with this $30.33, okay? But what if someone wanted to maybe prepay their rent for all 3 years? Okay? You know, and you're saying, well, does that ever happen? Yes, it happens. And what sort of a discount might we give them for prepaying that rent for all 3 years? If, in this case, we're going to make some assumptions, just real. So what we're basically saying, the ordinary scenario would be this. Okay, the ordinary scenario, assuming we're trying to make this somewhat realistic, but to illustrate the concept, but 25, 27, 39, okay? Our assumption, and I'm going to explain this, is that for this first year, normally we don't get to realize the income until the end of the year, okay? And we don't get to realize this income as an owner for basically 2 years now, and so forth, so on. Now this is an extremely important kind of accounting / income realization or recognition kind of thing. Most of the time when we look at real estate, we look at monthly numbers and we look at annual numbers. But whenever it comes to realization of income, most of the time we look at end of the period numbers, end of the month, end of the year. And the reason we do that is because most of the time, even though we may get paid at the beginning of the month or beginning of the year, we have expenses that occur over the course of that year. And so we sort of say, we're not going to really record that income until the end of the year after everything has been sort of processed. And that's just kind of the norm of how it gets done. So what we're saying here is we're going to kind of make the assumption that under ordinary circumstances, we would not receive this first year's worth of rent and realize it until they have been there really for the full year. Does that make sense? Because of the recognition of it. Would not receive it until the end of the second year, end of the third year. Now, what we're asking is, what if they want to pay the rent now, immediately, and we get to realize it and recognize it right there at time period 0 today? Does that make sense? So, you know, some of you might say,
if we're realizing it at 0, are we realizing that is it just a set price of year 2 and year 3 that goes up that much?
well, we know that, yes, it would be told that's what it's going to be.
Okay.
So we could say, I mean, at an absolute maximum, if they're prepaying their rent, you can say, okay, well, just give me all of that money, which would be 91 bucks a square foot per year. Or not per year, but 91 bucks a square foot for the whole lease, for the 3 years. Yes? But because they're prepaying it, we're offering them a discount. In this case, we're going to offer them a 10% discount. We're paying all of it now, money in the bank for us today. Everybody cool with that? Yes, no, possibly could be. Okay, now, to do this on the calculator, real simple. First things first, set the calculator to 1 payment per year.